Hello guys, welcome to Soul Fiction. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto was adopted by the mother of magic? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. A thread finds a name. Night broke the village open like a clay pot. Roofs shuddered, lamps spun out, and somewhere a child woke to a lullaby that wasn't there. The fox roared, something old and ocean-wide that made paper walls breathe in and out. Above Konoha, the moon tried to be a coin tossed into a storm. Inside the belly of a ceiling array, an infant floated. Not floated like water, floated like a thought that refused to sink. Seals spiraled around him in strokes of ink and chakra and fear, so much fear that the lines stuttered. The infant looked up and laughed at the shapes because shapes meant nothing to someone who had only just discovered fingers. A hand touched his brow. Not flesh. Warmth made into the idea of a hand. Little one, said a voice that was wind across rice, they have written cages around you. I will write something else. A thread appeared, silver as breath on winter glass. It glided out of everywhere and nowhere and kissed the infant's skin, then sank through like light through water. The child's eyes followed it, delighted. In the seal space, a fox bigger than the world opened one eye and stared back, then bared its teeth, less a threat than a warning, at first. You, the fox said, recognizing old power the way predators recognize the cut of a hunter's arrowhead. Do not meddle with mine. Not yours, said the voice, calm as a temple courtyard at dawn. Not anyone's. A child is a story waiting to choose itself. The silver thread hung. The infant's tiny fist closed around nothing, and everything sang in answer. You will be believed, the voice promised. Even if they don't want to. Even if you don't, I will not make you strong. I will make you witnessed. The fox's lip curled. The village howled. The thread tied a quiet knot around the infant's soul. His eyes, clear, open, thirsty, reflected the knot's shine. Then the world fell back into shouting, and the infant slept. Years later, the village pretended not to remember that night. Pretending is one of the things villages are best at. On the academy roof at lunch, the wind was honest. It tasted like sun-warmed tile and the cheap soy sauce from the convenience store down the street. Naruto sat with one leg swinging into open air and scratched at a stick of chalk until his palm went dusty. He'd found the chalk in a classroom at the back of a drawer. It belonged to nobody, so by the rules of children it belonged to him. Below, a cluster of kids formed a tight circle around a smaller one. They weren't hitting him. They were just doing the thing that isn't a hit but might as well be, closing in, asking the Sam. E question so many times it becomes an answer. Where's your lunch? Where'd it go? Did you even bring one? Naruto didn't think about it. Thinking always arrived a half step behind acting and spent the rest of the day trying to catch up. He used the chalk to draw a circle on the roof, thin as a hair. He blew dust away and whispered, not a prayer, not a jutsu. A name, but he didn't know to call it that. He only knew that sometimes words worked if he meant them hard enough. Found by first caring, he said, quietly enough that only the wind might count as a witness. Go on, then. The circle quivered, very slightly. Naruto pressed his hand to it until the skin of his palm felt the cold of a thought cooling. He let go. Down below, a girl who had been pretending not to watch stepped forward. Heart on her sleeve in a tiny tight fist. Here, she said, a little bravely. Take mine. I'm not that hungry. The missing lunch box slid out from under the bench like a coin finishing a magic trick and bumped against her shoe. The ring of kids scattered, because magic is a word even bullies don't like to be near. The smallest boy blinked at the box, then at the girl, then at the bench, then up at the roof where a blonde idiot pretended he had nothing to do with anything. Naruto grinned and rubbed chalk dust into his cheek on purpose, because it drew laughter when you made yourself a joke before someone else could do it for you. When he looked up, Iruka-sensei was standing at the stairwell door, watching with an expression that worried Naruto more than any scolding. Iruka wasn't angry, he was cataloging, as if trying to fit Naruto into a shape that made sense. Naruto spoiled it by waving too hard. Iruka's mouth twitched, then settled. He lifted 2 bentos. One of these is mine, he called up. And the other is, I can't remember. I suppose I'll just have to leave it on the roof, and if it's gone when I get back, I'll blame the wind. Wind's a thief, Naruto said solemnly. So I've heard, Iruka said. He left the food. Naruto ate it with his back to the roof tiles and one leg still swinging. He didn't try to make the name work twice. Names don't like to be pushed like that. Mizuki came like most bad ideas, prettily and with a lot of flattering words. He caught Naruto alone near sunset behind the academy, where the laundry lines make human geometry against the sky. Naruto recognized the look in Mizuki's eyes, the kind of shining he'd seen in the glass when shopkeepers looked at him. A narrowing that wasn't quite a glare. A focus. You want to be special, Mizuki said. Naruto snorted. I am special. I'm me. Mizuki smiled as if they were friends. I meant, learn something the others don't. A hidden scroll. Konoha has plenty. You could bring one to me, just to study. I'll put it back. Between the two of us. We could. Between the two of us, Naruto said, because sometimes a phrase feels like it took shape long before you say it. Like someone whispered it to you in a dream. He let the words roll in his mouth. Between the two of us. He didn't notice how the silver thread in him hummed at that. He noticed the way Mizuki's hand flexed. Iruka's voice carried from the hall. Naruto didn't wait to be caught and scolded in front of a teacher he liked. He bolted. The knight did that trick again where it turns the village into a maze, but Naruto knew the paths nobody wanted. He slid under laundry lines, hopped fences, and ran along the stone lip of the Naka River until the breath in his throat went metallic. He didn't know why he was running from a teacher, only that there was running in his bones. He found the forbidden scroll because if you look for anything past a certain hour in Konoha, you find whatever people least want you to. He shouldn't have touched it. He didn't do the smart thing. He did the Naruto thing. The scroll was heavy and soft at the same time, like a cat that decides it belongs to you. He unrolled enough to see lines, swirls, words that tasted like metal and smoke. He thought of clones. Everyone else's clones looked like theirs. His always looked like his, and sometimes they laughed before he did. A kunai pinned the scroll to the post beside his ear. Naruto. Iruka's shout should have landed like law. It landed like relief. Naruto flinched anyway. He didn't see Mizuki until it was late enough to be too late. The second kunai came out of the dark and whispered past Iruka's shoulder. Naruto moved without thinking. He grabbed Iruka's arm and yanked, and the kunai nicked Naruto's forearm instead, shallow but bright. Mizuki Street ebbed into the space between street and forest. His smile didn't fit his face anymore. There it is, he said, and Naruto, for the first time that night, understood that the scroll had just been a toy in a bigger game. The demon shows its hand. Iruka took a step forward, body angled to shield Naruto. Naruto felt something else step up inside him, and the silver thread tugged, and the word that L. And it on his tongue was not something he invented. It was something he knew, the way you know your name even when you are half asleep. I will protect Iruka-sensei, Naruto said. He said it the way you set a bone. His blood smeared along his skin in a line. He dragged the line with 2 fingers and closed it into a crooked ring around his wrist. He didn't know why. He knew exactly why. The air around them held its breath. Naruto's clone exploded into being. Not a puff, not a sloppy copy. The ring around his wrist glowed, and every clone that came after wore the ring, too, and every ring hummed the same line of writing. I will protect Iruka-sensei. It was not ink. It was promise, laid down where chakra could see it. Mizuki's second smile broke like a plate. They fought, because talking had already chosen its side. Iruka cut off Mizuki's angle to the scroll with the kind of motion you only see from someone who used to be faster than they are and remembers every path. Naruto's clones moved not in chaos but in chorus. The kind of chorus you get when a line repeats so many times it becomes scaffolding. Each clone's strike looked like handwriting. Mizuki's kunai flicked, mean and precise. Aim cracked across Naruto's arm like lightning. It didn't matter. The vow made movement easy in that hard way easy sometimes is. Every step cost. Every step paid back with interest. He felt cold set in behind his teeth. Demon. Mizuki hissed, and the word hit Naruto's ear and slid off like oil on water. Iruka's voice cut through it. Don't touch my student. The clones lost their cohesion all at once. Not because the vow failed but because the person it had pinned itself to became safe. Naruto blinked and found himself on his knees. His breath came out white as candle smoke. He laughed because laughter was the only thing left that didn't require balance. Cold, he said. Why is it cold? It was warm. Iruka was kneeling too, one hand on Naruto's shoulder. You idiot, he said, and it felt like an honor. You brave, ridiculous idiot. Is there food? Naruto asked, because sometimes your body insists you are small when you try to be big. Iruka laughed without humor and said yes, and tea. Hen Anbu took Mizuki away and took statements and took the broken shape of the night and carried it somewhere filing cabinets never could. Later, back in his apartment, Naruto tried to remember a joke. He told at Ichiraku that always cracked Chuki up. The edges of it slipped. He tasted the absence like a coin on his tongue. On his wrist, the faint ring of dried blood flaked. Under it, the skin felt warmer than the rest of him. As if someone had pressed a hand there earlier and it hadn't let go. It would have been easier for the Hokage to do nothing new. Konoha has the endurance of a boulder and the flexibility of one too. But even boulders notice when the river starts cutting them into interesting shapes. Anbu whispered more than usual that week. Root didn't whisper. Root didn't have to. Hiruzen watched Naruto through a screen of smoke and paperwork. You can do a lot of pretending behind those two things. And sometimes, if you're old enough, you are allowed to make a small reckless choice as if you were young again. Put him under Azuki, he said. Azuki Yugao. His aide blinked. Sir, she's precise, Hiruzen said, and quiet, and not the sort Danzo collects. The team that met on the training ground the next morning felt like a sentence with odd punctuation. Naruto showed up first, because he was always early when it mattered and always late when people said it did. Hina, Hyuga arrived with her eyes downcast and her shoulders back. Tenten came carrying a toolbox big enough to qualify as a teammate. Yugao was waiting, masked, a kunoichi-shaped shadow that smelled faintly of rain. My name is Azuki Yugao, she said, voice unadorned. You can call me Sensei or Azuki. Hyuga, Tenten, Naruto. Good. We'll be an apprenticeship cell rather than a squad. That means we will be judged on craft and outcomes, not exam scores. If you dislike this, blame the Hokage. Naruto grinned. Hinata looked up and didn't look away fast enough. It counted as courage. Tenten dropped her toolbox, and the ground thunked. We're not going to spend the morning telling each other our favorite colors, Yugao said. We'll spend 10 minutes proving we can do something useful. Naruto, draw me a circle. Naruto blinked. I don't have. Use the dirt, Yugao said. Hyuga, watch his hand. Tenten, tell me what the circle would do if we treated it like a seal base. They knelt without being told to. Dirt under nails is one of the Academy's great equalizers. Naruto drew, muttering to himself, not the way someone who learned art in a classroom mutters but the way someone who learned how to carry buckets mutters, counting, measuring, adjusting to weight. Hinata's Byakugan flared, gentle as a candle behind rice paper. He curves too tight there, she said softly, her finger hovering just above the ground, not touching. The thread of it would snag. Tenten squinted. If we anchor lines here and here, you could use it to prime a storage seal or a trip. Maybe a rotating drum. If it doesn't explode. I like not exploding, Naruto said. Good, Yugao replied, and for the first time there was approval in it. Barely. Again. They did it again. And again, until Naruto's lines learned T. Obi a little lazier and Hinata spoke a little louder and Tenten stopped changing her mind every 4 seconds and started changing it every 8 with purpose. When they broke for water, Naruto rolled his shoulders and grinned through the sweat. You have a peculiar relationship with the world, Yugao said to him like she was discussing the weather. You push on it. It pushes back. Like a door, Naruto said. Like a story, Yugao said, and the word snagged Naruto's attention hard enough that he forgot to make a joke. Sensei, Hinata said suddenly, gaze fixed past their shoulders. Company. 3 Chunin in police flak vests were waiting at the fence with paperwork smiles. Their sleeves hid their forearms, but not what their eyes did when they landed on Naruto. They drifted like cold drafts. Azuki-san, the one in the middle said pleasantly. We're here with a form to be signed acknowledging a volatile anomaly in your cell. Not a restriction, of course. Just oversight. Routine. Yugao's head tilted. She took the paper. She didn't sign it. You'll notice, she said, that the Hokage's approval block is blank. I'm sure that was an oversight, the man said. Yugao flicked her fingers. The paper ripped itself in stylized silence. You can bring it back with the Hokage's ink, she said softly. Donzo's. But say whose name it is. Don't lie on my training ground. The man's smile didn't move. Only his cheek twitched. We'll be in touch, he said, which is village for we're not letting this go. They left without looking like they were leaving. When they were gone, the air tasted less metallic. Who were they? Naruto asked into the quiet. The empty shrine covenant, Yugao said. And no, you can't call them that to their faces. They prefer covenant, or task force, or any word that makes them feel like a door instead of a blade. And they want oversight because I'm an anomaly. Naruto said. He was trying for bravado and landing near it. They want oversight because you are visible, Yugao said. Because you do visible things and the village is allergic to visible things it didn't plan for. Let's make sure when they come back, we're too useful to be cut apart without consequences. Tenten's eyes were bright. Hinata's mouth was set. Naruto looked at his hands and felt, faintly, the thread in his chest hum like a held note. Okay, he said, so we get useful. Good, Yugao said. I took the liberty of upgrading our first crank. Upgraded to what? Tenten asked, too gleeful for pure curiosity. B, Yugao said. Naruto whooped. Hinata didn't, but her shoulders lifted. Which for Hinata was the same thing. Border villages always smell like crops that don't quite trust the sun. This one was a huddle of houses around a mill whose wheel only moved when the river remembered it should. Tizuna's kind of place, except without a Tizuna. People kept their shutters closed and their kids in and their voices short. Yugao let Naruto walk point. Not because he was the best for it. Because he thought he was. Also, because she wanted to watch what he did when the world pushed back. The headman met them in a yard with a packed dirt floor and a tree in the corner. Whose roots had pulled away from the ground like fingers. He had a look Naruto recognized from his own bathroom mirror. Someone who had learned to count the things he did not have and call it honesty. Bandits, the headman said. We call them that because it makes us feel normal. They come with better gear than bandits should. They don't take much, but they take it with interest. They wrote signs on our shrine stones. They made my boy. He stopped. We need help. Official, please. We're here, Yugao said. That's official enough. Naruto walked the edge of the square like a dog sniffing for a trail. He didn't try to sense anything. He listened for a story. It was a dumb strategy, except it wasn't. The shrine stone by the well had been rubbed until the carving of the harvest kami's name went soft. Over that someone had daubed ink in a pattern that felt like a mouth closed too hard. Naruto didn't touch it. His skin prickled. Tenten, he said. She was already kneeling. Toolbox yannen. G open like a beggar who knows your pockets. She sniffed. Not village ink, she said. Not any ink I've used. The binder is wrong. Slick. If you push chakra into it, it doesn't grab. It muzzles. Null ink, Yugao murmured. As if reading a clinical note out loud to make it less personal. Hinata's eyes traced the lines with deliberate care. If we paint over it, it will still be there, she said. Like a bruise under makeup. What if we paint something louder? Naruto said, already grimy with the idea. Something that doesn't have to touch it to drown it out. You're thinking of a sigil. Tenten said. I'm thinking of a lantern. Naruto said. They built it in the shade because power draws people and you don't want to draw the wrong ones until you're ready. Tenten's hands moved like she had a song stuck in them. She sketched a rotating cylinder of scroll paper and chatter, inked with anchors in triangles and breath marks in columns. Hinata watched the threads of it, the way you watch a tapestry being woven from the back. Fingers hovering to nudge a misaligned stitch. Naruto sat in front of it and warmed his hands until he could feel each of his knuckles. What does it do? The headman asked, not scared. It listens, Naruto said, which is not the kind of answer that calms anyone who hasn't already decided to trust you. He planted the lantern on a crate in the square. It looked like nothing. It looked like the kind of thing traveling con men leave behind in towns. Naruto didn't care about looking like one of those as long as he didn't be one of those. He stood with his back to the lantern so he could see faces. "You don't have to fight," he said. "I mean, you might have to fight. But not first. First you have to decide what you are. What you'll be tomorrow morning. If you want this to work, you have to promise something small you can keep. If you promise it, say it out loud. The lantern will hear you. If enough of you are stubborn together, it will get bright." "This is nonsense," someone whispered. "Probably," Naruto agreed cheerfully. "Nonsense keeps me company, and I like good company. Hey, don't look at me, look at each other." A woman stepped forward, ipping her hands on an apron that used to be white. She looked at the lantern, then at her own feet, then up. Her eyes were cracked, but not broken. "I will," she said, and her voice shook and didn't break. "Open my shutters tomorrow morning and leave them open until midday." The lantern flicked like a fish. A point of light pulsed in its belly and didn't die. "That's not fighting," someone muttered. "It is where fighting starts," Tenten said, not looking away from the scroll as it drank the vow and turned it into engine heat. A boy, maybe 12, hair cut blunt by a knife with no patience, lifted his chin. "I will bring water to the square from the river and not spill any." A pulse. Brighter. A man with shoulders like a field's worth of worry said, "I will pay Makoto back the rice I borrowed." A pulse that lingered. "I will sharpen the mill blade," said someone over the fence, as if distance could protect him from the ridiculousness of promising in public. One by one, they made mouth-sized promises. The lantern filled itself with small light. It didn't look powerful, it looked true. When the bandits came, they came as if Saturday belonged to them. There were 8. They wore helmets-like chess pieces and armor that wasn't armor but pretended very well. 2 held nets strung with links that made Naruto's skin try to step backward. "Don't use chakra near the chains," Tenten said under her breath. "Or do, if you like screaming." Hinata's eyes flicked. Threads across the street. Tripwires tied off at the mill. "I can cut them." "Cut the last 1 second, Yugao murmured. "Naruto, talk or hit, but choose one. Don't blend them until you know how." "I can do both," Naruto said. "You can do many things," Yugao said. "Do this one." Naruto stepped into the square where the lantern sat breathing quietly. The bandit in front, the kind who liked to think he was in charge because he walked first, stopped 2 paces away and looked down his helmet at the boy in orange. "Tax collection," he said. "You owe." "We'll pay," Naruto said. "In a minute." "That is not how." "In a minute, after this," Naruto said, at the volume you use when you talk to someone who doesn't understand that oath. Our people are not pauses between their words. He turned without haste, put a finger on the lantern's frame, and spoke like someone telling a story to a room whose door is open. "Light," he said, "if you're listening. We made you. We meant it. Do your job." The bandit laughed until he didn't. The lantern swelled, not with flame, with believing. The light inside it rose and settled on the square like sugar spilling across a table. Coating everything. Not thick, not enough to blind. Enough to show edges. The shrine stone's ugly script looked uglier under it. The villagers looked taller. "Throw the nets," the leader snapped. One of the net men cast. The lynx sang. The light dimmed where they passed through it. The ring caught Naruto's ankle and bit. It bit not the way metal bites flesh, but the way a lie bites a truth. A dizzy hurt pulsed up Naruto's leg and took a memory on its way. He had 1 second to watch it go and knew helplessly which one it was, a laugh at a dumb joke Tsuki had told. The way Naruto had done the wheezing thing you only do when you don't need anyone to hear you. It was gone. There was a clean white place it had been. "Don't," Naruto said to the ache, and kicked anyway. Hinata moved without stepping. She turned her wrist and touched the thread of the net's arc the way you touch a fly's wing with the back of your nail, gentle enough to move it without breaking it. The net's fall skewed. It landed on 2 buckets, which was not a victory, except it was. Tenten had 10 kunai in the air with lines of scroll tape tailing them like dragonflies. They hit fence paws, TS and awnings and the old tree's fingers. The tape snapped tight. The street became a harp Naruto could play by shouting. "Left," he yelled at a boy he'd never met. The boy jumped left and the tape sang. And a bandit tripped over a line that hadn't been there a second earlier because the boy's motion had made that thread the loudest. Yugao didn't draw her sword. She watched the timing and moved people. You three. She snapped at a knot of men near the mill. Link arms and walk. Good. Keep walking. Don't look at me. Look at the woman with the apron. She's the boss now. The leader yanked at a second net as if momentum were the same thing as victory. Hinata cut the last tripwire second, like Yugao told her. The mill wheel juddered into motion because the river had been waiting for an excuse. The net snagged in the wheel and chewed itself. Your ink is ugly, Tenten told the man nearest the shrine stone. Sorry if that hurts your feelings. He swung. She wasn't there anymore. She was somewhere else. Because a pivot is a conversation between feet. Her heel kissed his knee and he remembered a prayer he'd never said. Naruto let the lantern press warm through his spine. He didn't try to be dazzling. He tried to be sufficient. He spoke not to the bandits but to the square. A bridge, he said, voice low. You're building one. Keep building it. One plank is a vow. Put it down. Put another. People who had been holding breath put it down and picked up noise. I will lend my saw. I will stand in the square after dark. I will tell my son to stop pretending we are not afraid. Each promise put weight on the ground where Naruto could stand. He kicked the leader in the stomach exactly hard enough and wondered if it would hurt more later. It would. Later is real even in fights. Second net man rolled his shoulders and waded into the light like someone who has learned how to walk through cathedrals without believing in them. He swung for Naruto's head. Hinata wasn't there to touch the thread this time. She was busy saving a child who had been clever enough to climb a fence and not clever enough to land well. Naruto ducked. Late. The chain brushed his temple with a kiss like a cold coin. He staggered. Another memory slid. He didn't see which. He felt the absence, and he hated absence. He loved empty bowls because they meant ramen could go in them. He hated empty in his head. Enough, he said through his teeth, and the word didn't go loud. It went true. The lantern flared like someone had leaned in and breathed a secret. The light climbed the chain like ivy. And holding it looked at his hands with new clarity and discovered that weight is a relationship. The chain sagged. Naruto hit him in the thigh. The man folded the way men fold when they don't like the ground, but the ground has been patient all day. The leader cursed in a language that tried to be clever with swears and didn't quite get there. He took 3 steps back and made a choice. It was the kind of choice that keeps men alive and makes them hate themselves. He ran. The others ran with him because people usually do the thing the person with the loudest armor does. Yugao didn't chase. She watched them go, then looked at the bandit who had fallen near the shrine stone and had not gotten up. Not dead, not yet, not brave, either. His sleeve had written up. A brand on his forearm looked lick. Someone had hammered the absence of a sign into his skin. A sigil that wasn't a sigil, lines that made your eyes want to skip. Yugao knelt and did not touch it. Null ink, she said again, meeting Tenten's eyes. Worse than yours. Hey, Tenten said, offended on behalf of her tools, and then sobered. Different binder, she muttered. Oily. You can smell it when you burn it. Like stolen prayers. Don't burn it, Hinata said. Very quietly. Please don't burn it near Naruto. Naruto realized Hinata was standing closer than she had to, as if distance were something you could negotiate with. He realized she was shaking and holding herself still anyway. He realized Yugao's eyes had softened half a degree. He realized the lantern had become an ordinary piece of paper and ink again, which meant it had done its job. Villagers exhaled in a wave. People started tidying because tidying is the ritual after danger, the way making tea is the ritual after sorrow. The woman with the apron put a hand over her mouth and then took it away and laughed in a way that sounded like crying and then like neither. Payment, the headman said, after all the right other words had been said. We can't. There isn't. Naruto opened his mouth to say he didn't need any, then closed it because Yugao's eyebrow moved half a millimeter. He looked at Tenten and Hinata and thought of tools and tea in the way nerves settle when your mouth is full. Rope, he said, and chalk, and noodles. 3 bowls, Tenten added. 4, Hinata said, then flushed. If there's enough, there's enough, the headman said, and because he said it like a vow. There was. They ate in the square under a sky that had decided to be blue again. Naruto didn't try to be the loudest. He let Tenten tell a story about the time she gged a kunai to fly back to her and almost took her own ear off. He let Hinata talk about the best place to watch dragonflies on the river because the other person thinks they are telling a secret, but really they are telling you what to save if the town burns. After, Naruto stood in front of the shrine stone and laid his hand on the original carving, soft under his palm, worn by fingers that didn't belong to anyone alive. He didn't try to fix what the null ink had done. He wasn't a fixer. He was a stubborn, small light. Tomorrow, he said to the stone. You'll be prettier tomorrow. Not prettier, Tenten said, coming up beside him. Louder. Hinata's eyes were wet without being tears. Yes, she said. Louder. They slept in a room above the mill that night, because the headman insisted. And because it is cruel to refuse people their gratitude. Yugao posted no visible guard. Naruto knew better than to believe that meant there wasn't one. He dreamed of a silver thread the way you dream. Of a song you can't remember when you wake up and then it finds you again later while you're waiting in line. He woke before the lamps and looked out the window, chin on the sill, breath fogging the pain just enough. The square had the clean look places get after a scuffle, like the skin after a fight, scuffed, rearranged, determined. The lantern sat on its crate, dead and useful. The shrine stone held two stories at once and didn't argue with either. Little one, said a voice that wasn't a voice, in the place between heartbeat and thought, as casual as someone saying, you did fine. You spend yourself poorly and generously. Try to keep some for when you're old. I'll be old, Naruto whispered, delighted and scandalized. Like really old, that sounds gross. You'll be 1,000 things, said the warmth, smiling with words. Gross as one. I lost a laugh, he told the thread. The net took it. A silence like consideration. We can't keep everything, the warmth said. But we can keep enough. Good, Naruto said, and meant it. He didn't see the shadow outside the village that did not belong to a tree or a man or a moon. It watched the square from the road's edge and then turned away as if it had never been there. Its eyes were the kind that learned from hate. It carried orders carved on wood. Back in Konoha, Lady Murasama stood barefoot in the ruins of a shrine and ran our fingertips along the gouges where names had been scraped. She was not old and did not pretend to be wise. The line of her mouth said she most valued things that held their shape when pushed. Wave, said the man kneeling in the rubble. Voice steady because his training had filed it so. We lost a shipment to the South Road. Leaf traced the driver back to a supplier in the docks. The ink binder. I know what the binder is. Murasama aid. I chose it. She knelt and laid her palm on the stone as if taking a pulse. Stop trying to make it smell clean. It should smell like what it is. Blasphemy, the man said dutifully. Medicine, Murasama corrected, not because she believed either word but because words steer soldiers. If people insist on making their lives into shrines, we will cauterize. An aide offered her a scroll without being seen to approach. She took it. Azuki Yugao, she read aloud. Apprenticeship cell, Hyuga Hinata, Tenten, subject, Uzumaki Naruto, file note, anomaly, high visibility, silver residue. She smiled with 3/4 of her mouth. The part that didn't smile held the rest in place. Good. It is easier to cut a bright thread than a dull one. Prepare Voidsteel for Wave, and send a friendly visit to Azuki's training ground. If she tears up our forms, bring a new pen. What should we mark on the forms, lady? The truth, Murasama said mildly. That we are here to help. The kind of help can be decided later. She stood. The ruin didn't look ruined. It looked waiting. It looked like the space you leave on purpose so you have somewhere to write a word that matters. The day Naruto, Hinata, and Tenten came home, the village had chosen to be bright. It does that sometimes. Lanterns had their shades off to let the last of the sun in. People loitered with the kind of loitering that says we might buy something if you woo us properly. The wind carried the smell of frying batter from 3 streets over. The mission desk smelled like paper that had been arguing with sweat and wan. Yugao turned in a report that said exactly as much as it needed to and made no poetry of anything. She received payment that was smaller than gratitude and larger than insult. Good work, the clerk said because you have to say something. Outside, Tenten swung her toolbox and hit Naruto in the thigh with it because gravity is honest and she is not malicious. Ow, Naruto said cheerfully. You never say, ow, at the right times, Tenten told him. I choose my battles, he said, and was rewarded with Hinata's small laugh, small only in volume. It landed like a nail in wood, secure. They walked the long way because you have to after something big. The steps help. Naruto's apartment was still his apartment. A door with a stubborn hinge, a plant he'd named and forgotten the name of. A cup with a chip that cut his lip if he drank without paying attention. He found his bed without turning on a light and dropped his forehead to the open windowsill the way you drop your head to a table after you win something and want to keep the feeling from sloshing out. Below, a cat walked the fence like a tightrope and chose not to fall. Above, the moon decided to be a coin again. The silver thread hummed in him, soft enough to forget unless you were looking for a reason to sleep. The fox in the seal space uncurled enough to take interest and not enough to look like it cared. You, Kurama said to the quiet, because it preferred hating to ignoring. What did you do to him? Gave him a witness, said the warmth. He will be eaten, the fox said, satisfied at th. He thought the way some creatures are satisfied by inevitability. Then he will make a meal of it, the warmth said, not angry. That is one way to be old. Kurama made a sound that wasn't a laugh but wasn't not. He lost something, it said. He will keep losing. Stories shed, the warmth replied. And grow. He'll remember why he wanted to laugh even when he can't remember the joke. That is enough. Most things, the fox said, are not enough. Children are, the warmth said. If we let them be. Naruto slept with chalk under his fingernails and dirt in his hair and the taste of noodle bro. Th in his mouth that was from that night and a dozen nights before it and could be from the next one too, if he asked nicely and paid in jokes. On his wrist, the thin flake of blood came away and left skin whole. If he thought very hard, he could feel where the ring had been. He didn't. He dreamed about a bridge you could build a plank at a time without having to know how long a river was. In the morning, he would forget a street name and remember a face and carry the forgetting without deciding it meant anything about whether he was a good person. He would be told to sign something. He would learn to say no to paper and yes to tea. He would kick the training ground dirt until circles cooperated and win a bet with Tenten about whether you could anchor a breath mark with a nail. He would street, and beside Hinata at the edge of the market and not say anything, and somehow that would count as saying a lot. He would feel the world push and push back, and he would think, door, then, story, and tea. He kind of smile that fits behind scars would sit on his face and check whether it liked the place. For now, there was sleep and a thread humming lullabies, and a village that pretended not to remember that night and, sometimes, remembered on purpose. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The Bridge and the Blood Writ. Fog makes liars out of distances. On the delta crossing into wave, everything was closer until it wasn't. Farther until it touched your face. The fisherman didn't speak except to tell them where not to put their feet. His boat smelled like woven reeds and old salt and someone's patience. Naru, sat on the bow with his hands wrapped around the gunwale, eyes on the white wall ahead. Hinata stood with her palm resting on the mast as if she could feel the fogs weave through the wood. Tenten had her toolbox lashed to a post with a knot that would hold through persuasion and betrayal. Rule 1, Yugao said, voice losing none of itself to mist. In fog, don't trust what you can't make true. What about what you can make true? Naruto asked. He blew into his hands. His breath came back cold. That's the work, Yugao said. Naruto drew a fingernail across his palm and rubbed chalk dust ram his pouch into the line. A little habit, useless by itself, except he'd found that something in him liked the texture. He whispered a small name into his cupped fingers. Keep. Not ambitious. Not pretty. The chill in his bones stepped back half a pace. You're talking to your hands, Tenten observed. They're good listeners, Naruto said. The fisherman laughed once, soft, like a cough that had changed its mind. Wave rose out of the fog as if the world had exhaled a village. The houses clung to the coast with the determination of barnacles. The bones of a bridge thrust out into the gray like someone holding their breath and counting. Chizuna met them at the docks, eyes red in the way that happens when you've argued with yourself all morning. He smelled like rice wine and sawdust and a rope that has been rebent too many times. You're late, he said. We're in time, Yugao answered. Your enemies aren't here yet. Chizuna squinted like a man trying to measure hope out of habit and suspicion out of pride. Hired blades on Gato's pay, he said. And something else. Something that makes the ropes slack when you tie them. You ever try to nail an idea to a door? That, null ink, Tenten muttered. Void steel, if you're unlucky. Quote, void steel. Chizuna wrinkled his nose. Is that a kind of expensive stupid? It's iron that learned how to say no, Naruto said. Loudly. Chizuna grunted, which was wave for maybe. They walked past the market stalls where women thinned fish soup with onions and men pretended not to count coins twice. Inari glared from a doorway in the way boys carry too much history for their size. Naruto was ready for the glare to prick him the way such things always did. It didn't, not exactly. The fog had left something in him like a buffer. You the hero? Inari asked. No, Naruto said. We're the part before that where people do annoying work. You look annoying, Inari said, but it lacked teeth. We're very good at it, Tenten added. Hinata smiled at the boy and he flinched. Because kindness is loud if you're used to quiet. They climbed onto the bridge spine that Chizuna had named in his head 100 times and in public 0. The skeleton groaned as the ocean pushed and pulled. Naruto crouched and ran a hand along a beam. It felt like a story in the middle of a sentence. Don't name it yet, Chizuna said sharply. Not out loud. Naruto blinked. Superstition. Discipline, Chizuna said. A thing isn't finished just because we start calling it by the end. Fair, Naruto said. He respected a man who policed his own hope. They set a perimeter Becca. You shinobi and carpenters share a religion. Measure, mark, cut, brace. Tenten strung tether lines from the beams to anchor points of her own chalkwork, muttering to her scrolls as if they were rude apprentices. Hinata paced the length of the span with her Byakugan open, eyes soft and relentless, hands occasionally lifting to pluck at air where only she could see threads. Do you see it? Naruto asked, stepping beside her. Hinata didn't answer right away. He liked that she didn't rush to fill silence. The bridge has lines, she said finally. Not just structure. Wanting lines. It wants to cross. The world knows it's supposed to. The ink on the shrine stones back in the village bent some of the want. I can smooth that. Teach me to see that, Naruto said. Hinata's lips parted and then closed. She seemed to reach for a word and pick a different one. I can help you feel where the world gets snagged, she said. Seeing comes later. We'll start with not tripping, Naruto agreed. They walked. It made a kind of sense in his chest. The first fog rolled back in thin and then thick, and then a second fog arrived, a fog inside the fog. The fishermen on the scaffolding swore and hunkered down without being told. Men who've worked a lifetime near water know when something's wrong even if they can't give it away to be right. Positions, Yugao said, sword still sheathed. Hinata, you're our horizon. Tenten, tethers hot. Naruto, I'll make something true, he said. Yugao's eyes flicked once. Approval. One notch. The mist condensed into a presence that had learned to love edges. Zabuza walked out of it. Headband angled, the massive bandage blade riding his shoulder like a loyal, hungry dog. Another heartbeat and Naruto felt, without seeing, the other presence 2 steps behind and to the left, light-footed. Mask smooth, attention like a hand ready to catch a falling apple. You're not the copy nin, Zabuza said, disappointed not to be delighted. But you'll do. I get that a lot, Yugao said blandly. Bridge builder, Zabuza called mildly over her shoulder. Your schedule. It's my schedule, Chizuna called back. Pay Gato if you want it. Zabuza smiled without changing the shape of his mouth. We're going to have a conversation, he told Yugao. Then he moved, and the mist moved with him. He came like a threat that had practice. Yugao parried without taking her sword out of its sheath. The clash knocked taste out of Naruto's mouth and replaced it with metal. A second shape slid forward, the masked one, Senbon in hand like a whisper made into things. Naruto Nha led and said a name because he needed seconds, not spectacle. Be still, he whispered, and Hinata caught the sound and threw it, threaded it, through the fog. The world obeyed in patches. Lanes opened. Not clear, but slightly less untrue. Zabuza's blade clipped one of those lanes and hit air that wasn't willing, just then, to move the way it should. A hiccup of physics. Yugao took it and turned it into an angle. Tenten's first volley took the tether lines she'd rigged and made them sing. Kunai sank into scaffolds. Scroll tape pulled taut. A bandit trying to flank slid and went lower than he meant to. Not much. Enough. Haku danced. There wasn't a better word. Their Senbon drew soft boundaries around Hinata's heart. Hinata stepped into those boundaries and then out, and when she stepped out she removed a thread with 2 fingers and Haku looked up very briefly as if surprised to be seen correctly. Don't, Hinata said, not a plea. A measurement. I'm sorry, Haku said, as if for something they hadn't done yet. Zabuza put weight into a slash that would have cloven the beam. Yugao's sheath met it like a true noun meets a clumsy adjective. Wood shuddered. Naruto lunged at the wrong moment and got his timing right anyway because Tenten's tether line snagged his belt and corrected him mid-air by exactly a shoulder width. He hit Zabuza in the ribs with a knee. Zabuza didn't care, but he noticed. That mattered. Little nuisance, Zabuza said, amused. The mist curled around the word like a cat in a lap. Big nuisance is taken, Naruto said, and got an almost laugh from Haku. A second later, a Senbon whispered past his ear and told him to stop trying to be funny. It was going to get bloody. They all felt it. Then a whistle from down coast. One of Tezuna's men, high and shrill. Not enemy signal. Warning. Naruto didn't have the luxury to parse it. Hinata did. Retreat, she said, so soft Naruto almost didn't hear. She was looking at something behind the fog, the way a good tenor hears where a story wants to go before the talker does. Yugao shifted, angled, yielded ground in a way that preserved dignity and scaffolding. Zabuza let them, not because he couldn't press, but because he was a professional and professionals don't trade small wins for large risks. Next time, he said. The fog took him, then the presence behind him, and then the air was only air again. They held the stillness too long. Because sometimes your body doesn't trust safety when it returns. Naruto felt the name he'd thrown lose its grip, and motion slid back into corners like cats reclaiming spots. Report, Yugao said, not breathless. 2 minor wounds, Tenten said. 3 bruised egos. 1 genius with a sword in a fog machine. Hunter Nin partner, Naruto said. Light feet, quick hands, eyes like, he couldn't find the right word. Mercy, Hinata said unexpectedly. It wasn't forgiveness. It was a diagnosis. Good eyes, Yugao said. We'll assume a second strike with more teeth. Tezuna, I'll double cruise on the span, he said, and sharpen the saw, and stop drinking at lunch. He scowled as if he'd been dared. For a week, Naruto grinned at him. That's practically sainthood. Tezuna snorted. Don't put that on me. I don't want the paperwork. They dug in. Tezuna's daughter, Tsunami, ran soup to the crews and threatened to shove it down throats if anyone got noble about not needing it. Inari sat on the roof and watched Naruto and Hinata practice cutting trip threads out of the air with the back of their fingernails. You keep doing that, Naruto told Hinata, and one day I'll be the second best thread picker in the village. You'll be the best at something else, Hinata said, which was not false modesty, it was a factual kindness. Like falling into the water, Tenten added. You're incredible at that, quote. I aim to excel, Naruto said, and then did fall into the water because the universe respects a good bit. He surfaced sputtering, hair slapped to his face, and Inari laughed, the short, unwilling kind that sounds like it slipped out of a pocket by mistake. Naruto took the laugh like a coin and pocketed it carefully for later. Night came in quieter than the morning had. Yugao rotated watches. Naruto woke on his turn with the feeling that he'd been in the middle of a conversation and the other half had walked away to get tea. He sat with his back against a post, breath fogging. The bridge hummed in his bones. The silver thread inside him hummed too, like 2 notes trying to find harmony without a conductor. Keep, he whispered into his palm again. Tea, warmth answered by a hair's breadth, present, amused, not overbearing. You keep. It sounded like approval and warning in one. The second strike didn't come at dawn when everyone expected. It came at late morning. When workers get careless and tea makes hands warm and sloppy. Not Zabuza this time. Gato's mercenaries, 10 of them, faces wrapped in cloth that wasn't waiting to be named. 2 carried nets whose links didn't shine. They drank light instead. Don't let those touch you, Tenten said, voice flat. Not it, Naruto and Hinata said at once. It almost diffused the panic. The men came hard. Null ink sigils glistened on their bracers, drawn by someone who didn't care about beauty and cared a lot about erasing it. The first chain went for Yugao. She slid under it and brought her sheath up so it struck the wood, not the work. The second chain went for Naruto because the universe keeps handing boys like him tests that they will take even if you tell them not to. He ducked left. The chain brushed his shoulder like a cold hand checking a fever. Memory slid. He didn't see which at first. Then, like a fish flashing belly, he knew. The color of the lantern over Ichiraku at closing, warm hun. EY orange that made cheap soup feel like celebration. Gone. He staggered and hated that the world could take something that small and make it matter. Name it later, Yugao snapped, reading his body like a page. Fight now. Right, Naruto said, teeth clenched. He went lower than mercenaries like. He crawled into their ankles and wrecked balance with his shoulder and someone's grandfather's trip. Tenten swung her tether lines into new curves, making the chain arcs snap short. Hinata stepped into a man's chest with gentle precision and convinced his lungs to rethink their priorities. Two went down. A third got clever, flanking around the scaffolding. Naruto turned to meet him and saw Inari on the roof, eyes huge and mouth open. Stay. Naruto started, and the mercenary's chain flicked Tawa. Rode the boy like an afterthought on purpose. Hinata moved faster than the chain. Her fingers didn't touch it. They touched the thread between chain and target. The chain's path stuttered, hit the beam, and wrapped it with a frustrated clink. Hinata exhaled. The exhale shivered. Naruto wanted to put a hand between her shoulder blades and didn't because now wasn't that time. Thanks, he said instead, properly. And it felt like the hand anyway. They pressed the mercenary's back, not pretty, not clean. Gato hadn't paid for pretty or clean. He'd paid for effect. The men bought time with their bruises. That time made room for Zabuza. He arrived like a door blown open by weather. Haku ghosted at his side, that ready apple-catching hand still ready. Zabuza looked at the chain men and grunted. Amateurs, he said, as if insulted by the quality of his co-workers. Tell your boss to buy better scum, Naruto panted. Or at least scum with dental plans. Zabuza's grin almost happened. You talk like you don't mind bleeding. Talking is cheaper than bleeding, Naruto said. For now, this fight didn't want to be won by clever. It wanted to test bones. Naruto learned a lot about where his skin ended and everything else began. He learned where Yugao was without looking, and where Hinata would be if he planted his left foot too far, and how Tenten's tether drums sounded when she was running out of ink. He learned that Zabuza respected anyone who could take a hit and make a joke that wasn't lying about the hit. Then Haku stepped in front of Zabuza and caught a Senbon meant for Naruto between two fingers without looking at it. Focus, Haku said mildly. On what? Naruto demanded. The part where we all die fashionably. On not letting that happen, Haku said, which is a good rule even if it doesn't help. The mercenaries reeled. Zabuza cut their retreat angle without trying to. He wasn't protecting them. He was protecting his fee from getting ugly. That's when the villagers started coming, trickling at first. Then in a small flood. Men with bad hammers and women with better brooms and kids who'd stolen their parents' good pots and Inari with slingshot shame burning his ears. Back, Naruto shouted. Don't. Chizuna's voice cut him off. We brought our work, he said, breathless, eyes not drunk at all. He held a plank over his shoulder like a ridiculous sword. We can lift it. Go home, Zabuza advised, not unkindly. This is professional. We're building, Chizuna said. Professionally. Naruto's head filled with a word that was bigger than a name and smaller than a prayer. The bridge in his bones leaned toward him as if to hear. The silver thread in his chest hummed like a street of lanterns lighting one after another. Don't, Yugao said softly near his shoulder, as if she'd sensed the gravity shift. You'll pay. I know, Naruto said. Do it anyway, Yugao asked. Naruto nodded. Yes. He didn't shout. He didn't throw his arms out or flex or say ancient words. He turned to face the bridge and spoke the kind of sentence you say to a person you're not sure knows you can love them. You are a crossing, he told it. You are the promise between here and there. They stand on you because you hold. We hold you because we keep our promises. Hinata's hand came to rest 2 inches from his elbow, not touching. I can thread it, she whispered. Do it, Naruto said. Tenten planted her feet and jerked her chin at the villagers. Say it, she ordered, and they did because someone told them to in a voice that respected them. Small things. Yours. Say them. I will bring a plank in the morning. I will sweep the span at dusk. I will boil water at the east end for tea. I will stop telling my daughter it's safer to be quiet. I will teach my boy to tie a better knot. Each promise found a place in the air and sat. Hinata's Byakugan saw the threads and stitched them across the scaffold beams like someone repairing a net with steady fingers. Tenten slap. Ed breath marks along the spine and the vault of it to feed the pattern. Naruto spoke the bridge's name without naming it, because Tazuna was right and some endings you save. The weave surged. Not loud. Not fireworks. It filled the span like weight fills a hand, making it capable of holding more without breaking. The mercenaries took a step back and didn't know why. Zabuza paused, head cocked, as if he'd heard a piece of music from a war he hadn't bothered to remember. Haku watched Naruto with something like sorrow and something like apology. The cost came. Naruto's breath went cold from the inside. His fingers numbed to the first knuckle. The thread hum became a hunger in his chest that didn't belong to eating. Something peeled itself out of his head and floated away. He reached for it and touched absence. It was the way Iruka's laugh sounded when he dropped something on purpose to make Naruto feel less embarrassed about dropping his. Not the laugh itself. The sound it made when it landed in Naruto's ears. Gone. He swayed. Hinata's shoulder bumped his without meaning to, except it meant to. Tenten's voice reached him as if through cotton. Say it back, she told him. Say the villagers' promises back. I will bring a plank, Naruto repeated, slurred. I will sweep the span. I will boil water. I will teach knots. I will. The words steadied him because they were other people's choices and he had become for a moment a person who collected choices and returned them polished. Gato's men realized they were not going to be the story. They tried to get out of the chapter with dignity and failed at both. The chain bearers snarled and swept the nets in wide circles to clear a path. The light in the chains drank at the weave and burped. Hinata took one thread and snapped it with the quick, mean motion you use on twine. The net's arc stuttered Andy wrong beam. The man holding it stumbled on a plank that had not been there a heartbeat before because a villager named Sayo had promised to bring one and had. And reality decided to cooperate. Zabuza made his choice. He cut through 2 mercenaries not to help the villagers but to deny Gato the satisfaction. Haku flicked Senbon like punctuation, disabling. Redirecting. Hinata met Haku's eyes across a span of bodies and fog. A conversation fit there, 1 sentence long and entire. Please don't, Hinata said with her gaze. We can stop. Haku answered with the smallest tilt of the head. I know, the tilt said. But not today. The mercenaries broke. The ones with the void steel left their chains because they were heavy and cowardice is lighter when unburdened. Zabuza walked toward Gato like rain walks toward roofs. Gato tried the currency of men with money and no imagination, threats. He died with surprise on his face, not understanding that some professionals have principles more expensive than coin. Haku was the one who paid. Not Naruto's hand or Hinata's shoulder could stop a stray blade fired from rage and distance. Haku stepped between it and Zabuza with a grace that looked like breathing. The blade took a rib and a lung in the quiet. Zabuza froze the way men freeze when their backstory catches up and sits down in front of them. Naruto was there because he moved when grief made gaps he could fill with motion. He knelt. The blood was warm and awful. Haku looked at him as if they were still in a clean fight. I thought, Haku said, apology in the edges of the words, that perhaps I could be useful again. You are, Naruto said, and it was not comfort. It was a fact. You will be, in the way you taught us to fight softer. Haku's lips quirked not quite up. Their eyes flicked toward Hinata. She saw me kindly, Haku whispered. She's mean to me, Naruto said, and Hinata made a broken sound that could have been a laugh. Good, Haku whispered. Be kept honest. Blood sounded wet in their throat. Your threads. They're not strings tied to you. They're bridges you let others hold. The silver in Naruto hummed to that. Haku's head turned toward Zabuza. I chose, Haku said simply. Zabuza knelt too, and if his hands shook no one had the indecency to notice. You fool, he said softly, Ride burning all the anger out of the words. You brilliant, disobedient fool. Haku smiled without keeping it. Their eyes unfocused. Build, they whispered, looking at no one and everyone. Or else someone will, cut. Their breath left like a friend late for an appointment who refuses to rush because it won't help. Silence. The kind that feels like a held plank while the nail goes in. Zabuza S. Chewed with blood on his wrists like bracelets. He didn't wipe it away. He looked at Naruto for a long second as if weighing a debt. Finish your bridge, he said. Name it something that embarrasses the men who tried to stop you. He slung his sword across his back and walked away without claiming any ground or making any threats. Some exits deserve to be left clean. The square at the foot of the B. Ridge filled with the business of aftermath. The villagers did the thing where tidying is a ceremony. Tsunami cried hard and then not at all. Inari stood under and even tried the job of holding up a roof with a stare. Tenten rubbed blood off the tethers with a cloth she didn't throw away afterward. Hinata washed her hands and then didn't dry them because sometimes you don't stop feeling blood until someone else tells you it's allowed. Naruto sat with his back against a beam, shivering. Yugao slid down next to him and draped her cloak over his shoulders without ceremony. You're shaking, she said. I spent too much, he said. The silver line, he tapped his sternum. The word wasn't a word and they both heard it anyway. Yugao studied his face as if memorizing it for a time when he would look different. You made the right trade, she said. It will never be cheap. Naruto closed his eyes. The mother's warmth touched the inside of his wrist, teasing, fond. You're greedy, the warmth murmured. Making whole cloth out of scraps. Somebody has to be, he thought back, and the warmth's chuckle felt like tea in cold hands. They installed a plaque at the bridgehead 2 days later, after enough hammering that the old men stopped telling the young ones they were doing it wrong. Chizuna argued with everyone about what to call it and then lost the argument with grace. The Promise Crossing, the plaque read in plain letters. The kind you don't need to be literate to respect. Naruto touched the word promise and winced. The ache of absence flared where the lantern color had been. He didn't remember the hue. He remembered wanting to see it. It was enough and not enough at once. The empty shrine covenant arrived the way bureaucrats do when they decide it's time to be generous, with faux RMS and polite faces and soldiers who looked at nothing and everything the same. Lady Murasama walked at the front, barefoot, as if she were home everywhere and nowhere. Her hair was tied back. She did not wear a sword. Her eyes wrote notes. Wonderful work, she said. A bridge is a civilization's best self-portrait. Which part is the nose? Tenten asked. Yugao gave her a look. Tenten shrugged and managed not to grin. Murasama's gaze slid off Tenten as if she were a feature in a room Murasama intended to rearrange later. She held out a slip of paper. Acknowledgement of oversight, she said. Routine. Yugao didn't take it. You brought the wrong pen, she said. Murasama's smile kept itself neat. We've had reports, she said, of null ink in the area. It is dangerous in untrained hands. We can dispose of remnants for you. And any anomalous residues that might pose risks. 2 soldiers stepped around her with a case whose lining smelled faintly of oil and doctrine. The marking on the lid was a flower that wasn't. Naruto's hackles rose like a dog's. He didn't move. He didn't need to. Hinata took a step, not big, enough to put herself between Naruto and the case without making a speech of it. Tenten's hand came up with a wrench that had opinions about bones. We'll handle our own leftovers, Yugao said. And our own. You can help by escorting Gato's ledgers to the magistrate. Of course, Murasama said. She glanced past Yugao at Naruto. Not hostile. Clinical. Uzumaki Naruto, she said, testing the taste of it. How interesting. Thank you, Naruto said, tone bright and empty. The way you keep cats out of the kitchen. Murasama's eyes sharpened a fraction. She held up her hand, palm out. For a blink, Naruto saw a shadow of a sigil there, something clean and mean, Dezig. Ned to erase without looking like it had. It wasn't activated. It was a promise. It would be a shame, Murasama said, still polite, if something unruly tripped and fell in a place where people are building. We'll fix the boards, Naruto said, smiling with all his teeth. We're good at that. She inclined her head. Good. Then we are in agreement. She turned to go, then paused and looked at the plaque. Promise Crossing, she read. A bold claim. A small one, Tazuna said from his ladder, not bothering to climb down to talk to her. We'll make a bigger one when we've earned it. Murasama, left with her soldiers and her case of opinions. The square breathed easier without pretending not to. That night, Naruto and Hinata and Tenten found Tsunami in the kitchen stirring rice porridge and threatening Inari with bed if he leaned on the counter one more time. They ate at the table with their sleeves rolled and their weapons on the floor. Conversation came in little bursts, Inari bragging about hitting a bottle off a fence post, Tenten insisting the bottle had helped by jumping, Hinata asking Tsunami for a recipe in a voice that made Tsunami write it down. After, Naruto went out alone because some victories need air. He walked the length of the bridge until the fog took the far end. His footsteps sounded like someone else's in a nice way. The wind off the water turned his ears red. He put his hands on the rail and thought about threads. Little one, said the warmth, a hand on his wrist inside his skin. You spent yourself again. I had change, he thought. Keep a coin for the way home, the warmth teased. And his chest ached in the spot where a laugh-shaped memory had been. Who held you up? Hinata threaded, he thought. Tenten built. Yugao blocked. Tazuna dared. Everyone promised. Good, the warmth said. Then the bridge is not yours alone. That is how it will stand when you are not here to talk to it. Will there be more of them? Naruto asked the dark, the ones who brought chains that drank. Yes, the warmth said. There is always someone who prefers silence to songs they didn't ask for. Build anyway. Naruto nodded into the wind as if the water needed him too. Then He turned and walked back toward the lights of the village, which had decided, for tonight at least, to be bright. On the table in Tazuna's house, next to the porridge pot and the wrench and the recipe Hinata had underlined twice, Tenten left a small roll of paper wrapped in cloth for Naruto. He opened it in the morning and found a kit, chalk fine as breath, a collapsible compass that knew the difference between circles and cages. A stub of charcoal that didn't smudge unless you asked, 3 breath marks on rice paper. For making loud things, Tenten had written on the cloth. Try not to explode. Naruto smiled. He made tea. It tasted like work and home. He forgot for a second that he had ever lost color, and then he remembered, and it hurt, and then he remembered the bridge, and it hurt less. He went outside to walk and ran into Hinata, who was standing by the door with one hand lifted as if she'd been about to knock and changed her mind to not. Morning, Naruto said. Morning, Hinata said. She looked at his new kit and then at him. Good gift. Very loud, Naruto said. Thinking of testing it on the headman's chicken coop. Hinata considered. Bad idea, she said, which in Hinata's language meant do it and see if the world breaks, then mend it together if it does. We leave at noon. Yeah, Naruto said. Back to paper and stairs. We'll come back, Hinata said, surprising herself by asserting a future out loud. We will, Naruto said, not as a wish. As a plank laid down. When they left, Tsunami put a wrapped bundle in Naruto's hands. Rice balls, she said. For the road. And if someone stops you and asks what team you are, say the honest thing. What's the honest thing? Naruto asked. The annoying work team, Tsunami said, and kissed his forehead like she had every right. On the ridge above the road, under a pine that had grown at a funny angle and made peace with it, Lady Murasama watched them go. She made no notes this time. She didn't need to. The muscles of her face arranged themselves into, subject will escalate. Show mercy as theater. Prepare sharper tools. Such bright threads, she said to the pine. The pine offered no opinion because pines are careful about politics. Back on the road, Tenten swung her toolbox into Naruto's thigh again. Ow, he said, a beat late but honest. You keep forgetting the right moments, Tenten told him. I keep remembering the right people, Naruto said. Hinata looked ahead and saw the path unspool like a line she could pluck if it snagged. Yugao walked with her hands loose and her eyes straight in the prong. Eyes of a sword that did not have to be drawn to work. The bridge shrank behind them until it was not the whole story anymore, just a good chapter. The plaque caught a sliver of sun and sent it after them like luck. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. Exams of the Unseen. Konoha announced the Chunin exams the way a festival announces rain. Posters, rumors, a dozen little arguments about whether this year would be tougher or fairer or both. Naruto read a flyer outside the mission desk twice and still felt the words like a drumbeat he had already been walking to. Apply, Yugao said around a rice cracker. You're ready. Ready to embarrass a nation, Tenten said, trying to spin her kunai and almost dropping it. She caught it with the satisfaction of someone who would swear she meant to do that. Which is an achievement. Hinata looked at the poster, then at Naruto. We'll be fine, she said in a tone that did not ask permission from fear. Fine, Naruto said, and a small coil of cold under his ribs. Asked if fine meant losing another tiny thing from his head when he needed it. He tucked the coil away and chewed. Ichiraku's lunch crowd swelled around them, shinobi, civilians, loud people, quiet ones. The village smelled like noodle broth and old wood and the kind of gossip that pretends to be advice. Chuki leaned over the counter with the authority of men who own exactly one shop and all the hearts in a 3-block radius. You signing up, kid? Yep, Naruto said. Don't throw up on my floor, Chuki advised. That was one time, Naruto said. And it was mostly water. Water with personality, Ayame said sweetly. They filed the forms. They took the training ground twice as seriously and then twice as loose because seriousness breaks if it isn't allowed to flex. Yugao had them run a turns until the dust hid their ankles and then made them stop right when they were learning, because that is how you keep learning anyway. The morning of the written test, Konoha decided to be hot. The exam hall air didn't move. Proctors sat like furniture that has opinions. Ibiki Morino, scarred, still, efficient, opened with rules that were not rules, couched in the kind of threat that doesn't need to yell. Naruto stared at the paper. Numbers stared back, smug. He had learned to put lines on the ground that did what he asked. He had not learned chess with algebra. Tenten's cough, 2 rows over, sounded like someone tuning a drum. Hinata's pencil tapped once, a rhythm only he would realize had matched his breath. You will not be clever, Yugao had said that morning, the blade in her voice flat but not cruel. You will be true and small. Naruto breathed into his cupped hands as if warming them. He traced a neat ring low on his wrist with the nub of Tenten's charcoal. The lines were light, almost imaginary. He said, very quietly, I will understand one problem. It wasn't grand. The promise snapped shut like a good cabinet. Heat ticked in his skin. The world did not open for him. It nudged one door. The numbers on question 3 unknotted in a way that felt a little like walking home by a new alley and having it still be home. He wrote. He whispered the steps under his breath, not words so much as arrangement. Hinata coughed once like she was catching her breath for him. Tenten coughed twice, and her coughs sounded like, stop, start, go. Ibiki's gaze swept the room and stuck on Naruto for a heartbeat. Naruto kept his eyes on the work. The vowel ring dulled. He wrote slower. The understanding got tired, like a friend leaning on a wall after a long run. When the final bell clanged, it felt like a coin being dropped into a jar he hadn't realized was empty. He put his pencil down. Outside, Anko Mitarashi introduced the second exam by biting into a dango skewer like it had wronged her. Forest of Death, she announced, waving toward the fanged fence. Don't die. If you do, fill out the form in triplicate first. Kidding. Kind of. Tenten pressed a paper into Naruto's palm. Breath marks, she said. You breathe on them. They remember the rhythm and then tell my tethers how to move with you. That's creepy, Naruto said, impressed. Hinata tied her hair back. Ith the practical grace of people who respect wind. Stay near, she said to both of them, which was different from, don't go far, in a way Naruto could not explain. They entered under a canopy that liked to whisper about falling on you. The air smelled like wet bark and animals that had decided not to be seen today. Naruto notched a line of chalk on a trunk and felt Hinata's gaze track the threads around it. Tenten used the added height of a root to string tape across a gap and make it a trip if they needed it. They made it past 2 ambushes, one from a nest of insects with too much organization. One from Genin who had decided a screaming charge was a strategy, before the forest changed tone the way a room does when someone walks in and owns it without trying. Music came, not loud, but precise. The notes found the pathways between leaves and moved in them. A flute somewhere to the right and too close. The forest made a theater of itself. Down, Yugao said, but it was not an order anyone could keep uncomplicated. Wolves padded out from between the trees. Not wolves, exactly. Ideas of wolves. Their eyes were old coins. Their teeth were the bits that break off clay pots. They circled, and the circle around them felt like it was circling too. On a branch as insincere as a promise, a red-haired girl in a Hittite dangled her legs and played the flute with the grace of someone daring you to find fault. Chiyuya's mouth quirked. Her eyes raked the clearing and settled on Yugao like a knife that was fond of sharpening itself on things that deserved it. "Boo," she said, and put another note into the air. It turned into the sheen of a wolf's coat and the soft weight in Naruto's ankles that meant you were going to be bitten if you stood still long enough. "Counter story?" Tenten asked out of the corner of her mouth. "Counter story," Naruto said. He raised his voice just enough to line the trees with it. "Once there were wolves," he said. "And hunters who learned their names so wolves wouldn't have to be monsters to be safe." Chiyuya's fingers flinched a note and recovered. "Cute," she said. "Make it rhyme next time, fairy boy." Naruto didn't rhyme. He didn't make it pretty either. He described the way a hunter sits down so a wolf can sniff his back and understand that not everything upright deserves blood. He said it fast, like a person trying to get something true out before the audience gets bored. Hinata moved the breath of that truth through the clearing in thin threads, snagging the fur of the wolf ideas until some of them stopped looking hungry and started looking curious. Tenten's tethers climbed the trees and crossed like a net. She didn't close it, not yet. She held it open like a net you don't commit until the fish commits first. "Enough foreplay, eh?" Boy's voice said from somewhere too loud. A sound nin with rap over his mouth dropped into the clearing and cracked his knuckles at the ground. His teammates fell into angles, one with tubes taped to his forearms. One with a shock of hair and a scowl that was probably excellent in mirrors. A girl with glasses and a clan crest at her collar lingered 3 steps back, eyes moving not like a fight. Ours but like someone listening with skin. Karen's mouth pressed flat. She held herself like someone remembering to be necessary. "Be lesson," the loud boy said, puffing himself up. "You're in. If you say, sound country's turf, in a forest." Tenten interrupted. "I'm going to lose respect I don't have for you." The boy flushed into his mask. He lunged. Yugao wasn't there when he arrived. Naruto was. And hit him with the flat of his shin hard enough to unmake an opinion. The tube's kid fired a blast of pressure at Hinata. She lifted 4 fingers, pressed very lightly, and the pressure hit her palm, bent. And forgot what it had meant to do. Chiyuya played sharper. The wolves sharpened too. Their hunger came back with friends. Naruto's counter story faltered. Tenten hissed, and the tethers snapped taut. A cage, suddenly. Not around the wolves. Around the idea of being hunted. The wolves paused, head cocked, and discovered they liked being the ones that could walk away. Several did. Chiyuya's lip curled. "Stop playing," she snapped at the boy with tubes. "You look stupid." He scowled at her. "Enough," Karen said, quiet. The quiet landed too far for such a small word. Her eyes had been on Naruto, and they didn't leave. Her senses were clan sharp, but what she read from him wasn't chakra. It was the thread's low hum, the warm, witness weight of it. She swallowed. "There's something wrong with him," Chiyuya suggested. "More with him," Karen said, surprising herself. Yugao's sheath whispered. The sound made decisions for several people who didn't know they had been taking too long. Naruto stepped into the space the sheath had created and filled it with a breath. "Chiyuya," he said, guessing. Her eyes flicked like someone hiding the surprise that he'd gotten it right. "What?" she said. "You don't have to play this one," he said. "Play a different one." She laughed at him as if it kept her warm. "What? Like a lullaby? You want a nap? You're better than that," he said. "Play something hard. Something that makes you honest." Her frown happened before she could stop it. She threw a fast phrase down the clearing like a dare. The wolves looked at each other and did not come another step. They sat down. Her teammates stared. "What are you doing?" the loud one demanded. "Conducting," she said, not looking at him. Shut up. Naruto took that gift and abused it by breathing the name of lanes again. Slower, messier, and Hinata made it beautiful. Paths opened in the air, not for people this time but for choices. Tenten turned her cage inside out and made rooms. Spock's people could stand in and admit they didn't want to be here. Karen pulled Tayuya by the elbow without meaning to be gentle. A log shuddered and fell where Tayuya's head had been, as if the forest had been offered a bargain and taken it. Naruto's gratitude hit both of them a half-second late and landed anyway. Tayuya yanked her arm free. Don't touch me, she snapped. Unless you mean it. Karen didn't apologize. She didn't move away either. The fight haunted the line between theater and harm for a minute that felt like 20. Then the sound team decided professionalism was a thing they could try tomorrow. They broke off, hard and clumsy. Yugao did not stop them. The forest let them go, after charging the toll of 2 torn shirts and 1 bruised pride. An hour later, under a slope where the trees held their own secrets and the air felt unused, the sound team circled their own argument to death. Orders said pressure, not lose, the loud boy said, pacing. Orochimaru, won't waste breath on your name, Tayuya said, picking moss out of her hair with elegant violence. Karen didn't join the bickering. She looked at the net of threads that hummed like a town square in Naruto's wake. ND thought about the difference between being needed and being held. Shut up, she said eventually, clean as a blade. We wait, we read, we pick our next angle. She added, because honesty is its own seal. We don't fight them if we don't have to. Scared, the boy jeered. Karen looked at him like you look at a cupboard you've already decided to replace. Of throwing away a choice I might need later. Yes, she pushed her glasses up. Be grateful someone on this team has paid attention to math. Back in the trees, Naruto pressed his back to a trunk and exhaled into his wrist ring, testing whether he'd lost anything this time. He came up with a blank space where a memory should be, the way Iruka's shoes squeaked when he turned too fast in the academy hall. He tasted the absence like paper. Hinata looked at him without asking. What did it take? She said. Shoes, he said, then laughed because it sounded ridiculous enough to hurt less. I miss them more than I should. We'll make new noises, she said. Louder ones. Louder, Tenten agreed, because that word had become shorthand between them for we will not let the world make us quiet. She handed Naruto a water flask and a glare that meant drink. He drank. They made the tower on a blue, brittle afternoon with a heaven of genin collected at the base, bragging in 6 languages. Tamari stood near a column with her fan half closed, talking without smiling. Her eyes were knives that had learned diplomacy. Gaara leaned against shade like someone who didn't need it. Konkuro pretended to be bored and didn't fool anyone with hands. Temari's gaze ticked over Yugao's team-like inventory. It paused on Naruto. She took 3 steps and cut the distance with wind the way some people cut it with charm. You're the bridge boy, she said. I'm a lot of things, Naruto said. That one's loud lately. Temari's mouth quirked once. Make a wind behave for me, she said. Not a flirt, a dare. He breathed and tried a name he didn't know he knew. Be kind, he told the air. It curled toward Temari's cheek and lifted a strand of hair in the sort of caress you don't talk about later. Tamari tilted her head and smiled without showing teeth. Cute, she said. The fan snapped open and brought a sheet of wind across Naruto's lanes. The name tore, not badly, enough to teach him something. Try again. He did, not the same way. Be mine, he said. And the word was not possession, it was stewardship. The wind came, confused at the grammar, and stayed out of Temari's cut. She laughed, short and appreciative. You're dangerous, she said, as if she were pleased to find a good knife in the drawer. I like dangerous people who know the price at the bottom of the bill. I'm reading, he said. She nodded at Hinata and Tenten without the condescension people use when they think they're being generous. Good team, she said. Try not to die. It's tedious to keep having to learn new names. Likewise, Tenten said. If you die, I'll be annoyed. And I hold grudges. Temari's grin reached her eyes that time. She drifted back to her brothers, wind scissoring a leaf in half just to keep her hands busy. Inside the tower, the proctor Anno unced preliminaries and the room pulsed with relief and dread because both are cousins. The first matches bled into each other. Sweat varnished the floor. The crowd sharpened or dulled their edges according to what they thought would get them what they wanted. Naruto didn't draw Tamari in the bracket. That would have been poetic, and this day had other poems to finish. He fought a boy from grass who tried to unravel Naruto's tethers with a field technique that assumed ropes when these were lines. Naruto redrew his own circle mid-stride and whispered keep and stay where the boy couldn't see him thinking. The tethers flexed. The boy fell for a second he didn't have time to fill with recovery. Hinata met a missed kunoichi with hands like knives and a chip on her tooth. It was precise, fast, near. Ugly, until Hinata saw the cuts in the other girl's stance and mended them by making her choose differently with the gentlest taps. The proctor called it, and Hinata bowed and wandered off, pale and buzzing. To wash her hands for a long time without needing to be told. Tenten walked into her match like a construction site with opinions. She built a machine in the time it takes some people to decide they're going to be witty. Then took it apart in someone's face. She apologized after. The apology was genuine and satisfied. Under the tower and under that, a different exam started. The empty Rhine Covenant came in through doors they had written for themselves with forms and politeness. Their uniforms were not uniforms. Their smiles were not friendly. Name scrub brands glinted under glove cuffs. Lady Murasama found a nice shadow and stood in it like a guest. Yugao met her on the stairs where the light made diagonals. Not your jurisdiction, Yugao said, voice a saw blade that didn't need to move to make you wary of fingers. Everything involving divine residue is everyone's jurisdiction, Murasama said, and the phrase had the lazy weight of policy. We've been asked to ensure the safety of participants. By who? Yugao said, stripped bare of question mark. By people who say, we, Murasama said. It saves ink. Her gaze flicked toward the side hall where medics had cordoned injured genin behind paper screens. We're disposing of anomalous remnants. Dangerous. Unstable. Yugao didn't look. I'll retrieve Leaf, she said. We take care of our own. Murasama's smile stayed polite and walked 3 steps forward. On a cot, behind a screen, a groan said I am young and bleeding and I have regrets in the universal dialect. The screen twitched. Chiyuya pushed it aside with an elbow and a snarl. Touch me again, she told the Covenant medic, and I'll flute you into forgetting your mother's name. Temporarily, Karen murmured, which was solidarity and science both. The C's hand hovered near the brand rod on his tray. Murasama didn't nod. She didn't need to. Habit is its own command. He lifted the rod with the care of a man holding a promise he enjoys too much. Naruto got there at a run that wasn't rude and didn't ask if Yugao would back him. She was already at his shoulder. Hinata flanked him, eyes thin, seeing the threads connecting rod to skin to story. Tenten stepped into the medic's personal space with a tool in her hand that wasn't a weapon until someone made her decide it was. That brand touches her, Naruto said, and you'll have to figure out where. I've put your pen before you can file the buttload of paperwork I'm going to make you do. Language, Yugao murmured without conviction. Murasama took in the tableau with satisfaction she hid well. We can neutralize the anomalies safely, she said. You don't have the tools. We have people, Naruto said. And they work better. The medic looked at Murasama. She gave him nothing. He made the mistake of looking to the brand for courage. Hinata touched the air and pulled the little thread that connected his certainty to his wrist. He found his hand suddenly unsure of gravity and set the rod down too fast in the tray. It clattered, a petty sound that became important under how many eyes listened. Leaf will manage Leaf, Yugao said as if she were bored. If you want to be useful, clear the hallway. Murasama's mouth tucked in the corner in an expression that translated to how interesting. We will speak later, she said to Yugao. To Naruto, she said, you collect dangerous attachments. I collect people who hate being told they're wrong about what they love, Naruto said. You're on the list now. Lists are for clerks, Murasama said lightly. We're editors. She stepped back and let the current carry her to other soft places to push. When she was gone, the room stared at one another like survivors after an avalanche when the snow stops deciding. Naruto let his shoulders drop and turned to Chiyuya. Up close. The bravado was real, so was the hurt under it, the kind that turns people snappish because softness has gotten them bitten. You still owe me a different song, Naruto said. I owe you nothing, Tayuya said. But she didn't leave. Karen stood at the bed's foot with her arms folded. She had not moved when the brand almost did, which told Naruto more than any flinch would have. Her eyes had skimmed the room and come back to him like a compass needle that resents physics. How do you cut the leash they put on you? Naruto asked Tayuya, because sometimes the fastest way to hear the truth is to ask a question that respects the lie. You don't, Tayuya said promptly. You play around it. You turn it into a rhythm. Her hand went to her upper arm, into her sleeve, a habit. A tag under there hummed faintly. Karen inked like a tuning fork someone kept plucking. Let me try, Naruto said. Tayuya's laugh returned. With what? Chalk and a bedtime story. You're not kissing it better. Never tried that, Naruto said. Could be fun. She snorted despite herself. Gross. He held out his arm. Right on me, he said. Hinata's head snapped toward him. Tenten stopped pretending her tool was a tool. Even Karen startled. What? Tayuya said flatly. Write a vow, Naruto said. Make it yours. Bind it to mine. If I'm going to cut the leash, I need an anchor that isn't me telling you what to do. Make the rule. That's suicidal, Tenten said sharply. Shared bindings are messy. Hinata finished, voice low. If she breaks it, it hits him. Tayuya bared her teeth. He thinks I won't. I think you'll decide whether it helps, Naruto said. And that you'll live with choosing. Karen shoved her glasses up hard enough to leave a smear. This is a terrible plan, she said. Which is what people say when they wish they had thought of it and don't trust the outcomes. Terrible plans are honest, Naruto said. And the Covenant is outside writing careful ones. Tayuya looked at the brand mark under her sleeve as if it were a scratch she had failed to stop picking at. Her jaw worked. She took Naruto's wrist. Her hands were calloused, musician and fighter both. She dug a nail into his skin until blood rose, not to hurt him, to write. She wrote in block strokes like a stamp. I stop playing when you say enough. The weave heard her. The words sank with the steady, terrifying grace of stones dropped in a calm lake. Their weight connected not two skins but two choices. Naruto's breath went white around the edges. Say it, she said, chin jerking, daring him. Enough, he said, and a subtle, mean little string attached to Tayuya's hands and flute and hunger and the old survival trick of making big noises snapped without breaking her. She jerked like someone hearing her name in a crowd and suddenly knowing which direction mattered. Her eyes widened. He swallowed, suddenly aware of the other half of the bind hooking his ribs. If he ever said, enough, for a petty reason, the thread would cut him first. Good. That made them honest. Karen exhaled very quietly and unclenched her fists. Stop looking so pleased, she muttered to Naruto. You just made your heart's job harder. It was bored, he said. Tayuya flexed her hand and didn't pick at her sleeve. Try it, she told him, daring again. Cut the leash. Hinata stepped close enough that her shoulder touched Naruto's without anyone noticing because the room was full of more obvious things. Her Byakugan lit the lines under Tayuya's skin. The curse tag wasn't a single knot. It was a web pulled taut across little choices made over too many days when a girl decided to play along because what else? Naruto breathed. Be free, he said, not to the seal but to Tayuya. Then he took the anchor of her vow and used it like leverage. He slid chalk across skin and nothing and touched threads he could not see, only feel the way you feel a splinter in your heel in the dark. Hinata nudged once, gentle as a sigh, and the web relaxed. Not gone. Not owning her. Tayuya blinked twice, as if her eyes had been calibrated to a lie and were learning true again. Huh, she said. It was not gratitude. She was saving that for when it wouldn't taste like surrender. Okay, Naruto said back, and the word meant you belong where you decide you belong. Late that night, the tower's long throat of corridors chowed with footsteps nobody registered because fatigue had paid off the guards. Murasama's aide laid 3 forms on a desk and sharpened a pen with slow, admiring care. He did not see the chalk line T ankle height until it kissed his boot and whispered detour. He turned left instead of right as if that had been the plan all along and spent 40 minutes ferrying cups to a meeting that did not require them. Murasama studied the line later when someone reported it as if filing paperwork about a superstition would make it less effective. She crouched and touched the place where the chalk had been, even though someone had scrubbed it. Her fingers came away clean. She was not annoyed. She did not believe. She did not disbelieve either, because she liked tools wherever she found them. Silver residue, she said softly. A thread that didn't tangle around the neck. Interesting. She wrote a neat note in her book. Subject, Uzumaki Naruto. Intervention delayed. Leverage required. Belief dynamics. She closed the book without the satisfaction of a slam. Slams are for people who need the room to know how they feel. Murasama didn't require witnesses. She harvested them. In the exam tower's top room. With the windows cracked to let the hot out, Naruto drew a circle with chalk on the stone. He didn't make it big or elaborate. He made it a place to stand. He looked at Hinata and Tenten and, A.F. Chair a pause calculated to demand nothing, at Tayuya and Karen. Write 3 words, he said. For what you want this to be when it's done. Not the exams. Us. Tenten went first because she hated rules but loved being first. She scrawled build, laugh, loud. Hinata bent to the chalk and wrote, tidy, decisive, home, free, enough. Naruto's heart stuttered at that third one and then settled again, amusement and awe sharing a chair. Tayuya rolled her eyes at the ceremony and then wrote choose, swear, eat. She popped up like someone pretending they hadn't meant to say anything important. Karen hesitated, considering whether giving them this would be a loss, then wrote, trust, read, stay. She underlined red like a threat to any room that underestimated her. Naruto took the chalk last. He printed believe, mend, and then stopped. Because the third word needed to be the one that wouldn't make him embarrassed in the morning. He wrote together. It looked smaller than the others. That felt right. They stood in the circle without holding hands, which would have made it sticky. The lines hummed the way a shop does when the owner is counting under their breath. The window led in a square of tea air that smelled like fried batter and sweat and roofs cooling. We're being sentimental, Tenten complained, eyes suspiciously bright. We're being practical, Hinata said. We're setting anchors. Same thing, Naruto said. Same thing, Tayuya agreed softly, like a person discovering she was still allowed to want. Karen didn't say anything. She watched the circle and tracked how their words stitched into the weave. She felt the silver thread in Naruto and decided that if she was going to betray anything tomorrow, it would not be this. Down the hall, Gaara stood at a window and did not look at the stars. Tamari leaned on the sill and fanned herself lazily. They're interesting, she said. Dangerous, Gaara murmured, which for him might have been the same compliment. Try not to kill them by accident, Tamari said. Tone as dry as chalk. On purpose, we can discuss. The tower slept badly, as places do when too many stories use them at once. The Covenant sent a smaller team to Aussie Saint in the morning and found the doors they wanted sticking for no reason. Murasama wrote down that the hinges needed oil and left it at that. A hinge that sticks is still a hinge. At dawn, Naruto walk. Cold at the edges and warm in the middle. Hinata had left a tea packet on top of his gear with a note that said drink. Tenten had tucked a new breath mark under the packet with one word, louder. Te. Uya had drawn a crude little flute on the back of the note and written, say it when you mean it. Karen had written nothing anywhere. She had looked at him late, when they thought he slept, like a purse. On bracing a door with her shoulder not because she trusts the lock but because she trusts her body. Naruto drank the tea because Hinata told him to. He held the breath mark like a con and knew where he would spend it. He touched the word together with one finger and felt the circle breathe back at him in tiny, ridiculous approval. He went to meet morning with courage and jokes and 3 small tie places in his head where color and sound used to live. He didn't feel less for it. He felt honest. Outside, the exam grounds thrummed. Enko flirted with chaos. Proctors arranged their papers like generals lay out maps. The Covenant measured the doors. Tamari cracked her fan once, warning and greeting both. Murasama smiled and made no move at all. Sometimes stillness is the sharpest push. Naruto laughed at something Tenten said and felt Kurama stirring with a grunt that was not disapproval. He wasn't sure what the fox thought of bridges and circles and girls who wrote vows on other people's skin. He knew what he thought. He was going to pass this test and the next one and get loud enough that even people who preferred silence would learn the song under their breath by accident. They lined up. They looked like children, which they were, which made the next part mean more. Let's be annoying, Naruto said. Professionally, Tenten said. Hinata reached for the air, found the thread she needed, and did not let go. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Weave Remembers. Morning came to Konoha with paper flags and bad predictions. Vendors argued with ladders. Proctors argued with clipboards. Enko argued with gravity and Wan, flinging herself onto the exam stadium rail to heckle a boy she'd never met. The air tasted like fried batter, sweat, and the kind of optimism that knows it's going to be punished for being loud and insists anyway. Yugao stood with her team under the north tunnel arch where the shadow took the edge off the heat. Hinata was pale and steady, hair pinned high in a way that meant business. Tenten had a bandage on her thumb that indicated a romance gone wrong with a wrench. Naruto rolled chalk between his fingers and kept checking his wrist as if the memory of a ring could be a kind of sleeve. Above them, a lattice of metal studded the stadium rim. New, official-looking, polite little sigils stamped along the struts. Yugao's gaze slid over them without looking like it did. Her jaw moved once. Containment pylons, Tenten said, sour. Someone got a new budget. Covenant, Naruto said. Yugao didn't look up again. We stay useful. We stay together. Temari crossed the field with the tide of contestants. She gave Naruto a look like a sharpened fan and tilted her head the smallest bit toward the rim hardware. She didn't say the word trouble. She didn't need to. Karen and Tayuya trailed in the civilian tier with the sound of people who had decided they were here and the world could file a complaint later. Karen's posture was too casual to be accidental. Tayuya carried her flute like a dare. Ibiki made a speech that didn't waste verbs. The first match started. Sand hissed. Wind snapped. Naruto watched, not waiting to be called so much as waiting to be aimed. The sun moved a hand width. Shouts climbed and fell. Somewhere in the east box, a child laughed the kind of laugh that pulls a row of others along behind it. Halfway through the third bout, 3 men in gray moved along the stairs near the pylons and touched the struts as if checking for loose bolts. They wore work belts and the wrong kind of attention. Lady Murasama walked the lower course with 2 aides who looked like they had been manufactured by a good tailor and a worse philosophy. She smiled with the precision of someone who kept her knives in a cloth roll. Routine, she said, to no one and everyone. Safety enhancement. Routine, Tenten echoed under her breath, rolling the word flat with her tongue. That's what you call drowning a pond so no one can fall in. Focus, Yugao said, quiet enough to matter. We respond when it breaks. When, not if, Naruto said, and Hinata's knuckles brushed his habit, anchor. He went out for his match too later. The opponent was a rock genin with shoulders like a grudge and a style that said my teacher is fond of walls. The boy came forward with a sensible plan. Smother, grind, end. Naruto gave ground like he was getting paid for the steps. He drew nothing big, just tiny purposeful circles where his feet landed, breath marks under his tongue. The rock boy tried to lock a clinch and found his elbow persuaded to choose a different future at the last second. Keep, Naruto whispered into his wrist, and the ground listened enough to offer him the right purchase when he needed it. He didn't style. He made the bow. Why trip over the fight the boy thought he was in? The proctor called it clean. Naruto bowed fast enough to look cocky and sincere enough to mean it. Temari met him at the sideline. Professional, she said, approval and test in one. Try not to get famous for it. I'm working on anonymous, Naruto said. It's not going great, she snorted. Get off the field, bridge boy. Your fans will make decisions if you linger. He moved. He was 3 steps from the tunnel when the bells changed. Konoha's bells have a voice for fire and a voice for weddings and a voice for run. This one clanged the old one for under attack, deep, doubled. Without apology. For a second the stadium didn't hear it because the roar of a crowd can drown out the sky. Then the sound cut through. People looked up because you always look up when trouble comes down. Paper seals along the pylons glowed and went cold. A hush fell that wasn't quiet. Jutsu in the air flickered and died. Summoning smoke failed to become anything. The whole stadium felt like a story somebody had crossed out in pencil. Murasama lifted a hand. Containment, she said, pitched to be heard. Remain calm. Over the east wall, a wave of wind flattened pennants and peeled screams off faces. A line of Suna shinobi ran along the rim. Snakes spilled out of a breach in the south like a bad joke repeating itself. The Hokage's platform bloomed in smoke and banners and then in a cage. Orochimaru's laugh carried badly and well. Yugao had steel in her hand without anyone seeing when she drew it. We move, she said. Civilian egress lanes. Then we punch holes in the pylons. On it, Tenten snapped, already ripping scrolls in half to make them into unforgivable tools. Hinata's Byakugan opened like a door that had been waiting to be knocked. Threads everywhere. Panic, hope. Power lines dressed as containment, old promises painted into the stadium stones a century ago. She saw the silver thread in Naruto because she always did. It hummed like home and stubbornness. It got very, very bright, and then the light bent. A ripple walked across color. Banners lost their red. Positions lost their names. On the field, between the splintered judge's table and the chalked center circle, a figure arrived the way a word arrives in your mouth when you didn't invite it and it insists it belongs anyway. He wore a ring of not letters above his head. They weren't symbols. They were erasures shaped like symbols, a coronet of unmeaning. The hollow halo didn't throw light. It took definitions and made them tired. He looked young in the way stone looks young after a flood, scrubbed of detail. Brother, the Unweaver said, and the word skidded across Naruto's skin and tried to decide where to stick. Mother has too many children. Get in line, Naruto said, not loud, breath thin. I'm busy. Quote. The Unweaver smiled like someone who had gone past sharp and come back around to gentle. He lifted 2 fingers and touched the air above Naruto's chest without moving them. The silver thread Hinata could see bent, quivered, and cut. Naruto's body didn't jerk. It refused to give him that. But something inside him lost tension and he stumbled as if a drunk had bumped his shoulder. Heat fell out of his hands. He reached, instinct, prayer, and came up holding absence that shaped itself into a very specific hole. He could not remember Urka's smile. He remembered Uruka. He remembered rice crackers and bad jokes and a stern tone like a house he liked to be scolded in. He reached for the curve the smile made and touched white where it had been. Give that back, Naruto said, honestly angry in a way that didn't wobble. No, the Unweaver said, as if handing back things was vulgar. You will be free when you have nothing left that believes in you. Hinata moved. She didn't touch Naruto. She threaded sight into the cut ends the way you tuck a blanket corner under a fidgeting child. Her voice came very quiet and very clear, the way a temple bell goes qui. Chi when no one is striking it and it decides to hum anyway. Friend, she said. The word stitched a hair. Student, she said. Another hair. Teammate, she said, and the silver trembled as if remembering. Son, she breathed, and it held. The Unweaver tilted his head, studying her not like a rival but like a craftsman sees a tool he respects. He reached for the halo. The not letters spun. Below, on the concourse, Covenant soldiers unlatched cases and lifted rods shaped like narrow brands. Murasama didn't look up. She didn't have to. The pylons thrummed and the sound smothered chakra like wool thrown over a lantern. Tenten crashed into the edge of the field with a bag of bolts and a dream. We're not beating it, she said. So I'm building around it. She kicked a bench into pieces, laid them into a frame. Bolted on the wrapper of a score drum with its skin cut into petals, and taped 3 breath marks around the rim. It looked like a musical instrument that had decided percussion was propaganda. I need mouths, she snapped. Lungs. Promises. Can't rely on chakra, Yugao said through teeth. Good. People don't turn off when seals do. Tamari vaulted the rail and landed in a spill of wind. Asuna Jonin yelled something about orders and she ignored him with the grace of long practice. Get your civilians to the tunnels, she barked at 2 Konoha Chunin who didn't need her rank to listen. To Naruto, an eyebrow flick. Choose. Make it loud, he told her. Tamari snapped the fan open and pushed wind not to cut but to carry. It lifted the first vow she could catch and threw it across the seats like seed. I will hold the door. I will share water. I will stop running when someone falls. The drum took the words and made them into a beat. It didn't amplify sound. It amplified witness. Each promise hit the skin and turned into motion. Shocks that ran along Tenten's taped pedals, down into the frame, into the ground. The sound was ridiculous and undeniable. Chiyuya climbed onto a toppled pillar in the center aisle with the sinful grace of a girl who knows gravity personally and owes it money. She set the flute to her mouth and took a breath like she was going to insult God and make him like it. Her first notes were not pretty. They were honest. Lullaby and curse have the same bones if you strip them down. A blanket of quiet fell where panic had been trying to root. Not a suppression. Chiyuya wasn't stealing voices. She was giving them a rhythm to walk on. Enough, Naruto said toward her, once, and her melody pivoted as if the word were a steering rope. Shared. Bind tugged at his ribs and hers and then went slack, satisfied to be of use. Above, the halo spun faster. It didn't like being in a room where people were deciding things out loud. The Unweaver stood in the dead center of the chalk ring and watched with the indulgence of someone who believes patience is a weapon. Where he walked, color didn't so much fade as forget itself. Karen moved like a magnet finding north. She should have been running. She was not. She put a palm to Naruto's back between shoulder blades like a clean push. That warmth, she said, voice tight, eyes bright behind the smudged lenses. The one you think is yours. It isn't. Naruto almost laughed. I know. She's got better taste. His knees shivered. He put his hand over Hinata's where she wasn't touching him and let it not be touching him anyway. Can you knock? Karen closed her eyes. She wasn't a shrine maiden. She was a censor with a talent for finding the parts of feelings that sang. She reached not up but in. And then out the way you reach through paper doors in summer to touch the breeze. The silver thread under her fingers vibrated, not with power but with attention. A warmth answered like tea poured fresh. There you are. The thought under the thought said, amused and a little worried. You do not rest. Later, Naruto thought back, mouth dry. We're being edited. So edit back. The mother said, N.T. He memory of how to laugh like a field, wide, harmless, necessary, ran through him and steadied his feet. Murasama stepped into the field of it without stepping into anything at all. She put 2 fingers to her own palm and pressed, as if assuring herself a scar was still there. Her brand rod medic lingered by a pile of stunned genin with a face that wanted to be helpful and failing policy for a spine. Yugao stood between him and the nearest body with a posture that would have made a better swordsman rethink. The Unweaver lifted his hand. The halo flared not light and cut the drum's beat in half. The frame shivered. Tenten flinched, then planted a knee on the busted bench and slapped a breath mark with the flat of her palm. We are not done, she said, to the instrument and herself. It held. Brother, the Unweaver said, straightening his fingers like a man about to count to 3 and take away a toy. Mother makes bridges. Bridges lead to traffic. Traffic leads to rules. Rules lead to stories that refuse to grow. I am a cut. I am mercy. Naruto's mouth went dry in a way that felt like truth and like a desert. Cut cloth, he said, and you get rags. Stitch rags together and people call it a quilt. They sleep under it. They live. This village is a quilt of lies, the Unweaver said, not angry. Heroes that never were. Faith in names that deserve nothing. Temeri's wind carry. Da roar of fresh vows from the far stands. I will carry a child that isn't mine. I will not look away. I will not break. The drum turned the roar into a rhythm and the rhythm into a path. Good, Naruto said to the Unweaver. Then we'll make them deserve it. He took a breath and did the thing he had decided he would do the first time he'd realized he was not a battery. He pushed, not down but out. He didn't call to the mother. He called to Konoha. If you can hear me, he said, not shouting, each word like a plank laid so someone else could step on it, say something small you will keep. Say it to someone, anyone. If you can't say it, think it. If you can't think it, stand and be seen. The stadium didn't explode. It gathered. Promises slid into the air and hit Tenten's drum and turned eye. NTO a pressure system Tamari could steer. Hinata took the thread of each vow and found where it wanted to tie. Karen shifted and gasped once like someone touching a current she'd only read about in scrolls. Chiyuya's lullaby walked the rail between silence and courage and didn't fall. Yugao pointed with her sheath and 3 Anbu who had been waiting for a kind of permission surfaced from the bleach. Erzan took down the nearest pylon with wire and sense. Sparks threw ugly light. The field moved half a breath. The halo shuddered. Orochimaru, up on the platform, lost the tail of a summoning and high. SSED like a man who had been robbed and now had to pretend he hadn't. Hiruzen moved the way old trees move. Not much, and then the wind remembers where it learned the word bow. We weren't part of that story except as background and the kind of prayer you make when you glance up and hope the sky knows what it's doing. The unweaver cut again. The halo sheared the edge of Naruto's circle where someone had chalked together in a hurry and the word flickered like a thought interrupted. Naruto's breath smoked at the edges as if he had said keep too often in winter. Something else left him. He tried not to reach for it this time. He failed. He touched the missing shape of how the ramen shop door felt under his palm when Chuki pushed it open wide and said his name like an invitation. Empty. Hinata's voice did not shake. Naruto, she said, and it did what you do with someone who is stepping too close to a drop. Name him. Naming is rude when you do it to people. It's violent when you do it too. A thing that thinks it has escaped nouns. Naruto looked at the unweaver and didn't try to be clever. You're not my brother, he said. You're a cut that forgot it was part of a cloth. The words didn't stick like a spear. They stuck like a pin that makes a map honest. The halo pitched. The not letters blurred. Then, briefly, almost became letters, marks that wanted to mean something and were scared to. Chiyuya blew a note that could have been a sob if you knew her and a snarl if you didn't. Tamari shoved a wall of wind into place and it held like a hinged door. Tenten yelled something about angle and fulcrum that was also, possibly, a swear. Murasama flinched. Not visible. Inside. The brand rod in her medic's hand looked stupid. Suddenly, a toy pretending to be a tool. She felt a prickle at the heel of her palm and turned it over without meaning to. For a second, so faint it could have been a trick of sweat and dust, a line there read doubt. She closed her hand like a trap and the line vanished, or hid. Brother, the unweaver said again, softer, the halo shivering on its axis. Names are cages. Names are handles, Naruto said. So you don't drop each other. He took one step forward. He made it small. He didn't make a speech. He let the stadium make one and lent it his breath. We will not break. If a vow can be a roof, it was. If a roof can be a bridge, it was. If a bridge can carry a cut, it learned how. The halo cracked, not shattered. Cracked the way a bowl cracks when you set it down too hard on a table you've never respected. A hairline. You don't see it unless you are. The one who knows where the weight always lands. The unweaver's eyes went ancient and young in a single blink. He lifted his hand. He could have tried to cut the thread again. He didn't. He raised his fingers like someone adjusting a picture frame on a wall he didn't own. Later, he said, as if invitations were things he always sent and seldom accepted. He stepped aside and the place he'd been went back to being field, chalk dust. And breath. Color crawled back over banners like a blush. The halo's not letters unfurled and spun and then went flat as if they were trying to look like a shadow that had always been there. On the rim, a pylon blew. On the platform, the arena wall buckled. Orochimaru slipped out of a coil of snakes with something in his shoulder that wouldn't knit cleanly, not a cut, not poison. A refusal. He hissed again, baffled to find his story not doing what it had always done for him. He fled with a smirk rehearsed and ragged around the edges. Gaara stood in the wreckage of the southeast stairs, breathing sand. Temari's wind pushed at his edges until he had to admit he was being touched by something he loved and didn't know how to adore properly. He blinked, not murderous for 6 heartbeats. It was long enough. Yugao's sword left its sheath once, and people who had been trying to write Naruto's name in the wrong column found the column burned. She said nothing. Heroic to the Covenant as they retreated into the logic of mission statements. Murasama looked at Naruto as if measuring a distance she had already started to close. Such a bright thread, she said, mild enough to pass for compliment. It will tangle. They always do. We'll keep it brushed, Tenten said, and twirled a wrench with the unnecessary flair of someone who had just been very useful. ND would be unbearable about it for a week. The field stank like blood and dust and fear that had been water and now wanted to be stone. Medics moved. Civilians moved slower, because coming back to your body after you gave it to a crowd takes a minute. Anbu pulled down a last pylon and the air did that trick where you realize you've been breathing shallow and decide to stop insulting your lungs. Naruto sat on the edge of a busted seat with his hands in his hair and his elbows on his knees. Hinata didn't touch him. She leaned her shoulder near his and let the space between them hum. He could have folded. He sat up instead. I want it back, he said, bleakly honest. The door, the smile, the everything. We'll fill the space, Hinata said. With new things that feel as good, or better, or worse in a way we choose. That sounds like work, he said. Annoying work, Tenten said, arriving with a canteen she pretended wasn't water and absolutely was. My specialty. Chiyuya hopped down from her pillar and landed like a dare. You've got blood on your face, she told Naruto. Is it mine? He said. Today, she said. She touched his wrist, right over the place she'd written, and didn't look at his eyes. Enough, she murmured, and the bind twanged and settled and his breath got easier by exactly one notch you could measure with chalk if you were stubborn. Karen leaned on the rail a foot away and pretended not to watch. She was flushed the way people get when they've been brave in a way no one will ever write down properly. Your mother, she said, testing the capital with her mouth. She pays attention when someone knocks like they mean it. She likes doors, Naruto said. We're compatible. Karen made an annoyed sound that didn't fool anybody. Fine, she said. Don't die. I just got used to how your thread hums. It's terrible company. Tamari stood 3 rows up, looking like a windbreak and a troublemaker and a sister bearing more than her share. She flicked a look at Naruto that contained a compliment and a warning and a coffee you might have to earn. Good choice, he told her. Best I've made all week, she said. She lifted a hand, not a wave exactly. A promise to continue an argument after breakfast. Then she was gone into Suna business and politics, which are both the same animal with different collars. Murasama paused at the exit stairs and lifted her palm again as if it itched. The ghost line of doubt did not show. She watched Yugao for a heartbeat with the jealous concentration of someone who sees a blade she cannot have. Then she left without theatrics. Editors don't slam doors. Konoha that night looked uglier for being alive. Ugly makes sincerity easier. The hospital ran like a spinning plate. The mission desk became a triage board. The noodle shop closed long enough for Ayame to sleep and reopened with a pot that says come in, I dare you to feel better. The Hokage's tower had new holes in it. Hiruzen took tea with one shaky hand and pretended his other hand didn't hurt. People pretended not to notice the funerals being scheduled because pretending is a civic duty you perform so grief can take turns. Naruto slept when they made him. He woke when someone cleared their throat near his pillow hard enough to be a threat. Chiyuya stood with a tray like a criminal caught doing charity. Hospital food, she sneered, identical to a person's eyeing I love you for the first time and being allergic. Eat it so I don't have to. Naruto lifted the lid. The rice looked like rice. The soup looked like soup. Somebody fought the broth and won, he said. Shut up and swallow, she said. Settling on the bed's edge, she watched him eat with the concentration of a creator analyzing her own mistakes. When I say, enough, next time, she added, casual. I want you to listen and not be a martyr about it. I'll try, he said, which was a promise. She nodded as if she had added a line to his file. Tenten came in, dropped a compact box on the side table, and refused to explain. Sigil Kit, she said, bored, succeeded at not exploding. Can't repeat the experience without adult supervision. You're the adult if I'm busy. That's a terrible plan, Naruto said, genuinely touched. She shrugged. All my favorites are. She eyed the chart at the foot of his bed the way a mechanic looks at a rattling she can't classify and decided to check the bolts instead. Drink water. If you die because you forgot to, I'm haunting you. Hinata arrived last, because she hadn't left. She had just been standing outside the door talking to a nurse about useless and useful things in her precise, soft way. She came to the bed and didn't try to smooth anything. She was not that kind of girl. She stood where he could see her hands if he wanted. He wanted. He put his hand palm up on the blanket. She put hers palm down a few inches away. The air between them hummed. No chakra. Not magic. Not anything anyone could supervise or regulate. Just a small place where being near felt like being held. How many? He asked, looking at their hands instead of her eyes. Names did you say? She didn't pretend to not understand. Enough, she said, and smiled because the word had earned a second meaning. I forgot the door, he said, unashamed about how it hurt. And Aruka's smile, and the squeak of his shoes. We'll buy squeaky sandals, Hinata said, straight-faced. We'll make a Yame install a new door that sticks. When Aruka smiles, we'll tilt his head until it looks correct. He laughed. It startled him into being more awake. Deal, he said. Karen stood at the window and watched the city breathe. The lanterns bloomed along the lanes like a field of small stubborn stars. She didn't pray, she counted. Vows have a math to them, and tonight's numbers balanced high. Even with everything the day had tried to take, she thought about homes and about who gets to say they are. She didn't turn around to interrupt, because she liked the humming between hands and wanted to let it be. Yugao came by, left a folded note, and pretended it was a mission update. It wasn't. It was 3 words in a neat hand. Rest. Promotion pending. On the envelope corner, in a smaller script, you kept useful. For Yugao, that was a love letter. Temari's letter arrived halfway through a nap and woke Naruto because paper thrown properly at a window sounds like someone respectful knocking. He opened it and found exactly 2 lines. You owe me a wind that listens twice. Try this. Be steady. He laughed again. He folded the letter and tucked it into the kit. He did not smell the ramen door. He wanted to. He let wanting be enough. Murasama washed her hands in a basin that had belonged to a monk and been requisitioned because wars are bureaucracies with louder forms. She watched her palm in the water. The ghost line did not show. She looked up without moving her head. We lost our moment, her aide said, braced for fault. We lost a move, Murasama corrected. Moments are abundant. What about the? He didn't know which word to use. Anomaly, boy, thread. He swallowed them all. What about Uzumaki? Murasama dried her hands and did not look at the rag. We make him necessary in the wrong places, she said. We make him tired. We offer him rest with conditions. We speak kindly and keep our pens sharp. And the unwever. Murasama tilted her head. We do not make the ALS with squares that refuse to admit they want to be circles, she said. But we study how they press. She stepped into the corridor where the light found every line in her face and decided they made a map, not a history. Doubt pricked again in her palm like a splinter. She put her hand in her pocket and squeezed until it stopped complaining. Editors don't bleed on their pages. Kurama uncurled the seal space and watched Naruto sleep with the uneasy fascination of predators who have been made to sit near campfires and learn that warmth is a trap they like. Your meddler is messy, he told the quiet. She raises children, the warmth said, delight and fatigue twined. Messy is the work. He will be eaten, Kurama said without conviction. He will eat, the warmth returned, amused. He is greedy for meaning. Kurama lay his head back down and pretended his tail swished for comfort, not because it wanted to. HMPH, he said. Which, from a fox that sighs, is a sonnet. A week later, with the EAD honored and the holes patched and the Covenant behaving like polite neighbors with a lawsuit in their pocket, Naruto stood on a different roof with Hinata and Tenten and the kind of exhaustion that costs less if you split it 4 ways. Chiyuya sat on the railing with her legs kicking like a child and her eyes not letting on. Karen leaned on the stairwell mouth and listened to the city breathe like she was learning a song she might one day admit she liked. They didn't need to talk about what happened. They needed to practice. Tenten rolled the compact kit open and showed them what she'd made. A flat disc you could build into a drum with 4 joints, breath marks that took blows better, a compass that would refuse to draw a cage if you tried. Hinata tied her hair back and stepped to the DGE where wind can be persuaded into manners. Naruto stood in the chalk ring he'd drawn and didn't look at his hands because he didn't need to. Be steady, he told the air, and Temari's letter got RMER in his pocket even if that was ridiculous. The wind held polite for 10 seconds, which is a lot for anything wild. Louder, Tenten said, automatic. Enough, Chiyuya countered, automatic. Home, Hinata said, automatic and new. Naruto grinned at them and at the village that had pretended not to remember and, lately, remembered loudly. He lifted his palm to the lanterns below as if taking attendance. The silver thread hummed. Not a leash, not a badge, not an order. A bridge, shared by many hands. He tilted his head. Somewhere far, something listened and did not forgive exactly, but nodded. The unweaver would return. Cuts always look for cloth. Murasama would come with pens and reasons. Orochimaru would find a story doctor who lied to him for a price, and the wound would ache and not quite close. Fine. Good. Bridges are not finished. They're being built. Naruto breathed. Keep, he whispered, and meant us. The word did what it always did. It held what it could, and what it couldn't, it marked for mending. Lanterns bloomed one by one along the market street as if they had agreed to become stars for a night and see how it felt. The city hummed in its human key. The team stood in a circle, not holding hands. And let the sound pass through. The weave remembered. They would make sure it kept remembering. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The city that forgot its name. The desert doesn't care what you call it. Wind scrubs the edges off words. Sand takes footprints and keeps none. Naruto learned that halfway to Suna when the dune he was arguing with changed sides and the sun pretended to help by pointing everywhere. Tenten trudged with her toolbox slung like a grudge. Hinata kept her scarf tucked so the wind couldn't steal it. Yugao made "Don't Complain" into a leadership style by practicing it first. Karen moved a little ahead and a little to the left, head cocked, as if listening to a song we didn't get. Chiyuya used her flute as a walking stick because that's how you make instruments mad enough to play well later. 2 more dunes, Naruto said bravely. 2 more dunes until I stab you, Tenten said cheerfully. Don't, Hinata said, faux stern. We'll need him if the sand tries to rebrand us. Rebrand, Naruto said. I don't want a new name. I like mine. Some people don't, Karen muttered. He didn't ask if she meant him or the world. By mid-afternoon the horizon gave a skyline. Walls like a sleeping lizard, wind towers like the spines along its back. Suna. The gate guards squinted as if judging their sense of humor. Tamari met them under an awning that had decided shade was a political statement. You look like trouble, she said, which was a greeting. Good. We're short. On trouble? Tenten asked. On people who use it well, Tamari said. She tossed Naruto a canteen. Drink. Then shut up and walk. Yugao stepped forward without ceding command. You didn't ask for an official team, she said. Then it's lucky we got friends, Tamari said. Breezy is a well-cut fan. You're being drafted to a demonstration they won't call a demonstration. The Covenant, Naruto asked, because the desert had been playing that word under his skin like grit. Temari's mouth went dry around the edges. They're advising, she said. And they brought a machine. The oasis city lay a day out from Suna where caravans paused to remember why water matters. Rukusa had a market that smelled like 7 kinds of spice and the same kind of money no matter where you go. Loud when it's moving, loud when it's not. Today it smelled like confusion. Signs hung blank as tongues bitten too long. Vendors shouted, fresh, fresh, and then fizzled into shrugs. A man at a melon stall blinked at his wares like strangers. Round, he declared finally. Sweet, probably, Tenten agreed gravely. And handed him a coin like a bandage. Hinata's Byakugan traced the air and found places where threads frayed to fuzz. Names won't stick, she murmured. I can repress some. Not all. Karen winced. Hand to her temple. That machine is humming like a prayer with the verbs missing. They saw it when they reached the plaza. A ring of metal pillars encircling a broad, bare circle of stone. The pillars were dressed in polite sigils and bad attitude. Wires taut between them thrummed lightly as if they hated their job. The air in the circle looked tired. Lady Murasama stood at the edge, hair wound up. Feet bare on sun-warm stone. Her aides moved like punctuation. A banner read safety evaluation in letters that tried very hard to be trustworthy. Citizens, Murasama said, voice pitched to soothe. We are testing a containment lattice to keep divine residues from harming your livelihoods. There may be minor side effects. Minor, Naruto repeated under his breath, as a melon stall sign declined to remember what it sold. Temari's fan rested very flat on her shoulder. We asked for a demonstration outside city bounds. You wrote a persuasive letter, Murasama said. We wrote 3. Consider this a tie-breaker. Yugao's hand hovered near her sword without touching it. What does it do? Isolate and scrub, Murasama said. Like washing hands. Or minds. Depending. She signaled. A Covenant tech at a console made of wood and confidence nudged a lever. The pillars thrummed. The wires sang a note that wanted to be official. The air in the circle went from tired to thin. Naruto felt something fall horizontal inside him, like a table dumped on its side. Small things in his head skittered toward the gap. He clapped a hand over his chest like a man trying to keep a coin from falling through a crack in the slats. Don't, Hinata said, low. She reached without touching, stitched 2 cut edges with her voice. Stay. The machine's note climbed. Signs around the plaza lost entire words. People stopped in mid-bargain, uncertain of what their mouths owed their ears. A little boy stared at his mother with the horrible patience of children who are about to panic but haven't been given permission yet. Shut it off, Tamari said, temper getting elegant. Murasama didn't look away from the circle. We need to see where the tolerances are. You're scrubbing the wrong things, Tenten snapped. And you know it. Collateral, Murasama said, and her mouth made the shape of regrettable without committing. Karen flinched as if slapped by wind. That's not just their work, she hissed. That taste. The hole, that's him. Who? Naruto asked, though he already knew. The air told him in the way it forgot. The Unweaver didn't walk in this time. He seeped, shade in a mirage. The hollow halo hovered above the circle like punctuation for a sentence that wanted to erase itself. He looked at Murasama with boredom and at Naruto with the old fondness of a cut for cloth. You brought a knife to a quilt, he said, gently chiding Murasama. I brought an editor to a messy draft, she said, which was honest enough to be frightening. Stop, Naruto said, and the word tilt. Ed the plaza by a hair, the shared bind tugging his ribs, tugging Tayuya's fingers. The machine's note wobbled. Tayuya's flute rose, unasked. She played a low, mean line that hung just under hearing, a baseline for witnesses. Enough, she said, to the plaza at large, as if the place were a bandmate. The sound gave people a floor to stand on. Murasama lifted her hand, palm out, poised to brand the air with policy. The skin near her wrist prickled. Doubt drew a pale, treacherous line and fled. Yugao's voice cut the heat. We shut it down, she told Naruto. Not a question. Order and permission. Enten's toolbox already had opinions on the matter. She kicked the lid open and yanked out an armature of wood, metal, and scroll skin, the skeleton of a drum if a loom had built it. She slapped it tog, ether with the rude competence of a carpenter on a deadline. Promise loom, she said. Patent pending. You made a loom out of a street, Naruto said, ready to fall in love with a machine on principle. I made a weaver out of a city. Tenten said. You're the thread monkey. Start threading. Hinata's eyes widened in a way that wasn't fear. She stepped to the rim of the bare circle and found it was not bare. It was scored faintly by foot traffic, by centuries of markets and messengers and pauses where people changed their minds. She whispered names for those grooves. Buy, sell, wait, decide, and the grooves heard her. Rukusa, Naruto said to the air. No flourish, no appeal to gods. If you can hear me, tell someone near you a small true thing about yourself you can keep. Not a promise, a truth. Make it boring, boring, Tamari muttered, escorting a knot of elders away from a sagging awning. Your specialty. A woman near the well put her hand on her apron. I always cheat the fennel, she confessed to her own astonishment. I tell people it's fresh when it's yesterday. The promise loom twitched. A thread flicked between 2 pegs and stayed. A cart driver leaned on his wheel and sighed. I hate my donkeys and I love them. A teenager with hair the color of curiosity blurted, I stole a peach once. A scribe at the edge of the circle whispered to his ink, I am tired of writing other people's names. The loom hummed, a sound you could feel at the base of your hand. Tenten adjusted a tensioner with the nose wrinkle of someone who enjoys her job too much. The machine's note faltered, thin as a lie put under pressure. Murasama's mouth flattened. She signaled. 2 Covenant soldiers in gray stepped toward the loom with rods raised. Yugao met them halfway. Her sheath knocked one rod aside like a rude thought. Temeri's wind leaned and made the other soldier put a foot wrong. He paused long enough to know he could either rebalance or keep his face. He chose the former. Smart man. Enough, Yuya said again. And her melody dipped and swerved, catching the unweaver right in the place where his patience wore thin. He looked up at her. The halo shed one flake of not letter. That blew away like ash and took a street's worth of vowels with it. Signs stuttered blank. Someone who had been going to say home said, "Ho," and stopped, eyes wide and wet. Naruto stepped into the sea. Urkel before his body remembered that stepping into erasure is stupid. The air bit. Hinata's breath touched his shoulder without touching it. Karen's hand was at his back again. Knock, he thought, no time for words. You don't rest. The mother teased in him, thrilled and exasperated. You will be old too fast. Later, he thought, and dug his heel into a groove called decide. He didn't reach for power. He reached for people. Tell me a first time, he called. Any first time. First melon. First debt. First kiss. I don't care. Let the loom hear it. It came like rain you don't dare ask for. Firsts fell into the loom and wove. A man who had never said aloud that he had cried at his daughter's birth said it. The girl with curious hair admitted the peach had tasted like guilt and sunlight. The SC. Ribe whispered that the first name he had ever learned to write was his own, and he had not written it in a long time. The loom turned firsts into handles. Hinata flared her sight and tied those handles to corners of the plaza where reality knew what it was about. The well lip smoothed by 20 years of hands, the step with the chip all children catch their toe on once, the crack that looks like a river. Names began to stick, not because they were shouted but because they were witnessed. The unweaver's lip curled. You are making them agree with themselves, he said, as if it were vulgar. I am making them seen, Naruto said. And every time a first landed in the loom, he felt a little of the cold lift off his fingers. Murasama walked the circle's edge with the careful patience of a woman. Troubleshooting a recipe she has to serve in an hour. She saw the way the loom stitched ordinary truth into an extraordinary defense. She liked machines, even when she hated what they did. She lifted a hand and dropped it. 10 covenant rods came up at once. Brand the musician, the nearest officer snapped, voice too grim to be entirely his own. Her sound is, don't, Naruto and Hinata said in the same moment. Then Naruto laughed because the answer is sometimes yes. Chiyuya looked down at Murasama with mad, fierce grace. Come up here, she said. Brand me where everyone can see it. She had the flute in her hand and caught it on the way back like punctuation. The crowd, not even a crowd, just people who had become a crowd without deciding to, watched. Murasama did not like theater she did not direct. She didn't move. Naruto took Chiyuya's old line and made it into one they could use. He lifted his wrist. The words she had written there weeks ago had faded into skin. He held it up where the plaza could read anyway. I stop playing when you say enough. This isn't mine, he said to the city, to Murasama, to the machine that was sulking at being outvoted. It's ours. If she breaks it, it hits me. If I abuse it, it hits me first. That's what oversight looks like. Not your rods. Witness. The plaza swallowed the silence after that and grew bigger around it. Someone near the loom began to cry very quietly. The machine's note fell another half step and sounded like an apology. The unweaver stepped fully into the circle, bored with the foreplay. The halo tilted. The not letters flared like teeth too clean to be real. Say goodbye, he told Naruto mildly, and cut. He didn't take a laugh or a door this time. He went for the silver line itself. Hinata's voice broke on. Son. She reached deeper and found nothing but the place where it should have been. The cut was clean. Karen shoved her palm into that hole like a wild idea you get when you're out of good ones. Knock, she thought, not to power. Not even to the mother, to the part of him that keeps choosing us. It answered, not a goddess, a stupid, stubborn boy's pattern of saving what he can reach. The loom snatched that ND turned it sideways and fed it back through him until standing was possible again. Naruto's jaw ached. The words that came out made no sense and made all the sense. You're the part that thinks getting smaller is the same as being safe. He told the unweaver. You're a cut that forgot it came from a promise. The halo cracked, not the hairline from Konoha. Not a shatter. A fork. It made a sound like hard sugar giving under a spoon. The machine squealed. Tenten yelped. Don't you die on me, you beautiful idiot, which, contextually, could have been for either Naruto or the loom, and slapped a brace in with the heel of her hand. Temari's wind bullied a wave of firsts into the skin. I kissed a girl behind the dye shop. I cheated at dice. I planted a tree from a seed in my pocket. I loved my brother and he never knew. The loom purred. Murasama raised her palm as if to brand the air with enough and found the ghost line again in her own skin. Doubt. She closed her hand on it hard enough to hurt. Shut it down, she told the tech without looking at him. What? He said, startled. But, shut it down, she repeated. We'll bring it back to the lab. She sounded bored. She was making a list of what to fix. It was a long list, and it started with require consent and ended with change the gods or change the people who think they need them. The tech threw the lever down. The pillars sagged with visible relief. The wires. Note died like a lie dismissed. Names fell back into place the way cups fall into hands. The melon man put his hand to his heart and laughed at a word as if he had always loved it. Melon. It tasted like melon when he said it. The unweaver watched the wires relax and the plaza get its breath back. For a second he looked wistful. They like their handles, he said, almost fond. Yeah, Naruto said, sweating. We like not dropping each other. The unweaver turned to go, not walking, just deciding himself elsewhere. He paused. Mother will not thank you, he said. She loves you too widely to make room for fate. There will be a price for that. Good, Naruto said, because some days he could do nothing but be honest. I get suspicious when things are free. The halo's crack held. The knot letters wobbled for just long enough to suggest they might want to decide what they were for. Then they spun themselves tidily back into null and the unweaver was nothing but air, remembering he had been there. Murasama stood with her eyes on the loom as if memorizing the shape of a tool she would never get to own. She looked at Naruto. You will tangle, she said. You already are. We carry combs, Tenten said, and wiggled a tension screw like evidence. Tamari walked into Murasama's space as if it were air. Your men brand my people again, she said lightly. And the desert will remember their names as a warning. Be serious, Murasama said. I am, Tamari said. Professionally. She tilted the fan, and wind walked through everyone's hair without knees. Sing it up. Tamari is a considerate tyrant. Covenant soldiers packed the pillars with wounded punctuality. The machine left the plaza on a cart like a bad idea being escorted out of a party. Murasama lingered just long enough to assure herself no one would be arrested politely. She smiled at Naruto as if they were acquaintances who always meant to get coffee and never did. You collect loud attachments, she said. I hope you are writing the first draft of your own eulogy. It's efficient. I'm writing invitations, Naruto said. To the wake after. Morbid, Murasama said. Human, he said. She left with her hands clean. Editors don't smudge the margins. They named the plaza something stupid that made Tazuna laugh when Tamari wrote it to him later. Witness gate. Someone hammered the words into a plaque with letters a child could trace. The loom got folded into a box so Tenten could carry it around like a secret and take it out at parties. The city didn't forget everything it had lost. It remembered enough and marked the rest for mending. On the walk back to Suna, Hinata bought sandals with ridiculous squeaky soles from a market stall that had rediscovered its sense of humor. She ate it was for a cousin who'd appreciate the joke. Naruto didn't call her on it. He loved being handed jokes like that. Chiyuya played a tune that was not a lullaby and not a war march. It belonged to people carrying things together. Karen counted the pews of firsts in her head and liked the math. They camped under a sky indifferent as gods in a drought. Yugao sat with them, sword at her knee, cup in her hands. You were useful, she told Naruto, which is as warm as she gets. Don't make hobbies of being irreplaceable. It makes people ambitious. Ambitious how? Naruto asked. Ambitious about replacing you, she said. Right, he said, and tucked the lesson into himself like a breath mark he meant to use. Temari's letter came 2 days later on a runner who had outrun his sandals. She sent a wind-wrought scrap of a map and 3 instructions that read like jokes: eat salt. Don't argue with dunes. If you ever use the name be obedient on me I will stab you. Naruto grinned like a bad student. Konoha wore scaffolding well. The hospital hummed safely. The noodle shop door had developed a stutter on one hinge that made it kiss the frame twice. Naruto pushed it open with a palm and the sound was stupidly perfectly wrong. A squeak, a catch, a squeak. His chest hurt the way things hurt when you've decided to forgive them. Ayame looked up and made a face. I told Dad we should oil it. Don't, Naruto said, voice thin. Not yet. Iruka was at the counter, papers tucked under his elbow the way he keeps useful weight on old tables. He turned. Naruto's brain went white at the edges. Becca. Use the shape of a smile is not the same as its weight. He reached for nothing and got the whole thing anyway, brand new. Iruka grinned like a man who had forgotten how to grin and found the recipe in a drawer. You look different, he said. I'm annoying, Naruto said. You always were, Iruka said, and the easy rudeness tasted like melon. 2 bowls. 3, Naruto said, thinking of Tayuya's tea. Heaving habits and Tenten's appetite and Hinata's lie about a cousin's sandals. Maybe 4. Iruka's sandals squeaked when he stepped back to shout the order. They squeaked because Hinata had slipped them to him with a straight face an hour earlier and said, a present from a student who thinks you should be easier to track in the halls. Iruka had laughed then, and he laughed now, and Naruto kept the sound like a coin he wouldn't spend. Kurama watched from the seal space with the wary satisfaction of very old things forced to admit they like warmth. You'll be eaten, he didn't say. You'll eat, the warmth said. And the fox made a sound in his chest that human throats call a chuckle. Outside, lanterns took turns becoming stars. Inside, bowls clattered. Naruto put his forehead on his palm and listened to Konoha breathe. On his wrist, the place where Tayuya had ridden and where the city had read hummed softly, not a leash, not a badge. A handle. He looked at Hinata's sandals where she tucked them under the counter like contraband. He reached across the space between his hand and hers and let it hum. He didn't make a vow. He made a choice. Keep. The word did what it always did. It held what it could. And the rest they would mend together, with chalk and thread and breath and the patience of people who had decided to be loud for a long time. He ate. He laughed. He allowed himself to be witnessed. Somewhere far, in a place between an eraser and a headstone, the unweaver weighed a cracked halo and thought about handles. Somewhere nearer, Lady Murasama practiced writing the road consent until it looked less like a concession and more like a tool. She didn't like the taste of it. She liked that it worked. That surprised her. She filed the surprise carefully under later. The desert forgot their footprints. Rukusa remembered its name. Soon as Wind learned a new trick. Konoha's door squeaked on purpose. The mother of magic did not say well done because the world doesn't pay out praise as coin. She hummed like a lullaby you don't have to deserve. Naruto slept that night with chalk on his bedside table and a folded breath mark tucked under his pillow, because comfort lives where silly does. He dreamed of a loom and a city and a girl who could cut thread without breaking anything that mattered. He woke and went to work. Chapter 5 End.